Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through the politician's spin. Now, I've had a couple of weeks off, so I'm looking forward to this show, and boy, have I got a rip of a show for you this week. Now, first up, I caught up with Winston Peters on Monday morning before he flew out on another foreign affairs mission in the Pacific. And then we'll have a chat with Nathan Smith, a freelance writer who was cancelled from his job during the pandemic. And then we have the inimitable Olivia Pierson and her latest views. Naturally, we'll hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about last week's presidential election debate. Of course, we have the whale bag to get your feedback too. And don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Today, I want to talk to you about the latest example of bureaucratic and political bungling that proves just how out of touch our government and ministers can be. But you'll have to remember the words of Daryl Davis. He's an American rhythm and blues musician and activist who said, "A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the proper information, and still makes the wrong decision." Well, it seems Paul Goldsmith and the National-led coalition are determined to illustrate this point perfectly. The so-called Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill was the brainchild of the last Labour government and Willie Jackson, and that was meant to tackle the issue of tech giants allegedly exploiting our local news. The idea is to make Google, Facebook, and other big tech companies pay for the news content they use on their platforms. Sounds fair, right? Well, hold your applause, because the devil is in the details. Media and Communications Minister Paul Goldsmith has confirmed that the bill, which enjoys near unanimous support across the media sector, will move forward. Here is National being the other side of the same coin as Labour. However, the National Party, always the party of the status quo, seems to be pushing on with this despite the glaring flaws in the legislation. They're even planning to align it more closely with the Australian Digital Bargaining Code. Ah, yes, Australia, the land where this plan already fell flat on its face. Now let's take a closer look at what's really going on here. Andrew Holden from the News Publishers Association is ecstatic, saying this bill will allow media companies to negotiate fair payments from big tech. If they can't agree, an independent arbitrator will step in. Sounds like a neat little plan, doesn't it? But before we get carried away, let's remember how this played out in Australia and Canada. The big tech companies simply stopped serving news in those countries. They didn't negotiate, they just walked away, leaving the so-called solutions in the dust. And yet here we are, determined to repeat the same mistakes. But it's almost like the underpants stealing gnomes from South Park. You know, famously, they just came up with a plan for profit where they would steal underpants. Step one for them was steal underpants. Step one for this government is tax social media giants. Step two is something, don't know. Step three, profit. Now, if I was running Google or Facebook or X, I'd block all the news content the moment this law looks like it might pass. The public outcry would be deafening, and the bill would likely be withdrawn faster than you can say, bad idea. Even the ACT Party, one of the few voices of reason here, gets it. They pointed out this bill won't solve the fundamental challenges facing traditional media. The problem isn't that people aren't interested in news, it's they don't want what's currently on offer. Media companies claim they need protection from internet giants, but who really needs whom in this equation? These media firms thrive on the traffic they get from Google and Meta, and it's a symbolic relationship, and breaking it won't fix anything. But as Forrest Gump famously said, stupid is as stupid does. And this bill, folks, is a prime example of doing something stupid. Instead of forcing flawed legislation through, We need to address the real issues facing our media industry and find solutions that actually work. Telling the truth and actually reporting the news might be a good start.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Winston Peters was on The Crunch in March, so it's time for a catch-up, and I've got a bone to pick with him. Now, I managed to catch him on Monday morning before he flew out on another diplomatic mission to the Pacific. So let's listen to Winston now. Welcome back to The Crunch, Winston Peters. Good to have you back.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
Now, I hear you're heading off overseas again tonight. You're spending a lot of time overseas, Winston. I guess that's the job of foreign minister.
Well, it's not just the job of the foreign minister. The reality is when you have vacuums and voids through lack of attention, a new government's got to make it up as fast as possible. We've covered more ground than the last government did on this matter in the whole 3 years. That more, and just on 6 months. So it's not sort of a travel contest. Look, it's hard work. You're flying all the way tonight to Solomon Islands and straight into tomorrow morning, then on to Nauru and then on to Niue. But we've got to ensure that we, in the Blue Pacific, of which we're a critical member alongside other countries, we're all critical, have a proper engagement, because in the end, as time goes by, people want to be influenced. They want to know what your influence is and how can they influence you. And it comes down to personal contacts. You can do all the you can do all the meetings you like, but it's nothing like face-to-face.
You recently went to Fiji. I'm particularly interested in Fiji. What was your impression of the state of Fiji just a bit over a year past the last election they had there?
Look, I went there. The first country I went to after the new government was formed was Fiji, because they're a critical part of the Pacific, particularly in that part of the world, so to speak, alongside the Pacific Islands Forum being there as well. So I had meetings with Rambuka, and he took me along to the army barracks, which he hadn't been to all those years since he was once the former prime minister under different circumstances. But we went along for the first time in his recent career to the army barracks, and I got to see half of the cabinet there, so it was very, very good.
Now, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you. People say to me often, don't vote for Winston Peters, he never delivers. Name me one thing that Winston Peters delivers. Well, that's always easy, that one, because I just say the gold card.
What about the Prevention Growth Fund? What about all the new aeroplanes that the military have got? Under us.
No, I know that, but I'm stunned, because in the last week or so, we've had nothing but delivery from New Zealand First on promises.
Well, the Therapeutics Products Bill, the first reading's come up. It's the repeal bill, mind you. And we've also secured a full comprehensive inquiry into the COVID disaster, particularly the 2021-2022 period, when gross amounts of civil liberties and rights were attacked, and we spent billions, tens of billions of dollars needlessly.
You invoked the coalition agree to disagree clause. Now, there seems to be some confusion amongst listeners about that. They're saying that you're sort of caving in. But correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't the agree to disagree bit about the the continuation of the existing commission of inquiry, and that's what you disagreed with the government on, or the National Party and ACT Party on?
Well, National and ACT wanted to continue the old, imperfect, and I say utterly compromised commission of inquiry. And they had reasons to call it quits, because the moment Hekia Parada resigned, that was legal grounds to shut the thing down.
Yeah.
But, if you can't get people to agree, then the next best thing is to say, well, let's disagree and let's have the option that we campaigned on, and which is in the coalition agreement. And that's what we're going to get come October this year.
Well, that's the start of it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that Tony Blakely is compromised as the chair of that?
Well, in his declarations of conflict of interest, he said so himself. And he was advising all sorts of bodies, and he was also advising one Andrews in Victoria. They had the longest lockdown of us all, and we had the second longest lockdown. You
Yeah.
see what I mean? And I'm not attacking anybody personally. All I'm saying is, in a professional, ethical, constitutional way, this is not the right group of people for this job.
Yeah. The feeling amongst many people is the original inquiry was set up as a whitewash to justify everything that was done.
The terms of reference tells you that.
Yeah.
The moment I saw those terms of reference, I said so. This is designed to cover the government's backside.
Well, not just the government, too. Every party that was in Parliament at the time. New Zealand First wasn't there at the time when those decisions were made.
Well, you know, every party at the time signed up. You wouldn't believe this. They signed a pact with Labour not to talk to these protesters. These protesters were, in some cases, 35 years in highly successful businesses, losing the whole lot, or being mandated out of their job because they didn't want to be vaccinated. People have got a right to say no.
It was an appalling display, which, of course, ended up with you being trespassed from Parliament by the then Speaker, Trevor Mallard, who now works for you.
Well, you know, I was trespassed alongside some of my other former MP colleagues off the parliamentary grounds on the basis that I was a terrorist. Now, that's a shocking disgrace. Did you see any mainstream journalists say this is appalling?
No, I didn't. I saw them all sort of laughing, going, ha ha, all these politicians have been trespassed.
They all thought it was a big joke until I took Mallard to the High Court and had him done over. But you see what I mean? This is how I begin now to see how some societies are so corroded because no one stands up for fundamental rights, and sooner or later there are no rights. And I saw during this period hints of how societies go wrong when everyone decided that if you had a different view on vaccinations, then you were down a rabbit hole, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you were off the planet, mentally speaking. Yep. All those things they did to people. And now they don't want to have the other side of the debate being put up by forensic experts saying, hang on, there were defects in all of this, and you needed to know them.
Isn't part of the problem the fact that a vibrant democracy relies on a very strong and vocal fourth estate that holds powerful to account, and it actually don't become cheerleaders for those who are in power?
Well, you say powerful fourth estate, they'll only be that if they are independent, and if they're prepared to tell both sides of the story, both sides of the argument, in any production that they are involved in. They don't just stop with, these are what we think as journalists. They go and find where there's an alternative view and put that view out there and let the reader desire what they want. The reader, after all, in case they don't know it, or the listener, in case they don't know it, or the viewer, in case they don't know it, is actually the master in all this, because in the end, if you don't have them, you don't have a business.
There's a lot of talk about propping the media up with state funding. We saw the results of that during the Ardern regime when they had the Public Interest Journalism Fund, and it was neither in the public's interest nor was it journalism.
Downright corrupt. You had to sign up to their narrative.
Yeah.
And, when I said it was corrupt, these journalists and producers and ownership, they were incensed with me saying that. And I feel like saying, listen, you so-and-so, I know what corruption looks like. I've seen it and I've exposed a lot of it in my career. And you sign up to a narrative where if you don't stick to the narrative, they can take the money back off you. Don't tell me that you are innocent.
Well, they're not innocent. They're actually collaborators. They were the collaborators with the previous government. And they worked hard to silence dissent. It was all part of I don't know whether it was overt or covert or arranged or nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but I found it very strange that almost every media outlet was in lockstep exactly with what the government was saying.
Look, it's July 2022 when the Serious Fraud Office, having lost the case at the High Court, goes off to seek an appeal, and they get beaten a second time. I put out a press statement about that, and not one mainstream media carried one word I said, that is the view of the victor in a court case. Then they appealed another time, and they lost, and therefore, 3 in a row. Now, let me tell you this. How can they spend $4.2 million and get away with it and have the journalists in this country not prepared to print one word of New Zealand First winning this victory against a serious sport office? And we won because, as the court said and agreed with our plea, so what is the crime here? And they could not outline what the crime was. So see what happened. Electoral Commission, Serious Sport Office, they're all out there going for one political party and its leader. And here's the rub. They never even interviewed me. But how like that for dirt and underhand behaviour?
Well, but they say that they're all pure. I mean, but there's 2 examples just in the last week, isn't there, of mainstream media failing to report major news. The first was, of course, a poll by Curia Market Research about Maori wards. Not a mutter, not a murmur, nothing from TVNZ.
That was stunning. That was massive. A clear indicator. And a polling company that they use. But for this case, they decide to shut it down.
Yeah.
Didn't use it.
The numbers were spectacular. Like 58% of people believe it should be the ratepayers who decide on Maori wards, not councils.
But the majority
67% of Maori Party supporters and 51% of Labour Party supporters say the same thing.
Well, that was a stunning part about it. The Maori people were for fairness as well. But here, have you got these people saying, no, we're the voice of Maoridom, not you. Yeah. We'll speak for you. This is arrogant. This is what I call inverse racism. And a lot of Maori have got inverse racism. They got racism against their own people when it comes to their own people, especially in their view. Now,
yeah, and then they did nothing about the COVID inquiry either. It wasn't mentioned at all that it had been. The only thing they mentioned is that you'd invoke the agree to disagree, but not the extension of your promises being met by the government with the new inquiry.
Feel sorry for them? Don't you feel sorry for some of these media people? I do.
No, not one bit.
No, I do. I feel if that's the quality and sincerity, integrity, or the romance and glamour you place around your profession and how important it is, then I feel sorry for you because you don't understand how critical free press is. You know that famous French Arqueuse? He wrote a book. He wrote this attack on the French government way back almost over a century ago, and it changed French politics. He just went out and said, this has got to be said. But no, here we got the New Zealand media, unlike any around the Western world, I got to say, they're utterly self-censoring, in tune with each other against what I think is the majority public need to know. And it shows now big time.
Now, speaking of media fusses and non-news, have you received the papers from Chumbawamba yet?
You know I never will. Look how many headlines they gave it. Oh, they were horrified.
Winston Peters to be sued. You don't have to file papers in a court in order to be sued?
Well, if you leave too much time between the event, it shows that the event has not had any damage, or the complaint that you have has no merit. It begins to show that.
They probably had increased sales as a result of it.
Look, I think everybody had forgotten them until I've revived it.
Well, I see Joe Biden used it on the weekend to self-promote on his Twitter account. He was saying, if you get knocked down, you got to get up again, and there's even a song for that. So I'm wondering when some of the media lovies in New Zealand are going to contact Chumbawamba and ask if Joe Biden's going to get sued.
Well, you'll be astonished how around the world politicians watch other campaigns and actually sometimes steal some of the ideas. Do you remember Obama saying, can we fix it? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Well, who had that campaign? We grabbed Bob the Builder in 2002 and ran that as our theme in a snap election, which Helen Clark had called. It went from 1.8 to 10.8 in 4 weeks. But that was the theme. Then not too long after that, I hear a guy called Obama saying, can we fix it? Yes, we can. It's amazing, I'm not saying we don't, but I watch overseas campaigns to see the cleverness or the wisdom and in trying to avoid the mistakes that you see overseas campaigns making.
I remember one of the biggest mistakes I ever saw was Ed Miliband standing there with this big, massive stone that he'd got a stonemason to carve his promises into. Of course, he didn't win the election, so I wonder what happened to that stone. It was massive.
Well, I remember the Longy government talking about their promises written in stone, and it turns out it was written on plastic because at the end of the day, Moses, having come down from the mountain, showed that it wasn't capable of delivering.
Well, Helen Clark had her pledge cards, remember, paid for by the taxpayer, of course, and passed retrospective legislation to make that legal. It's just unbelievable.
That's a fascinating question, though, because when we all got caught by that retrospective legislation, and New Zealand's number one tax lawyer said to Winston, you have to confirm that money to give it to some charities. You cannot give it back to the government because it'll attract charity tax. Charitable taxation has a certain ceiling. This is the number one tax lawyer telling me that. So we gave it to 10 charities, including a woman who was massively damaged at the family RSA and almost lost her life. We helped her get her home and get started, get back in life. But you know something, the rest paid it back. And this is in our case, when I look back on it, the Electoral Office gave us permission or okayed a lot of our expenditure before we expended. But when they got the law wrong, we got blamed.
Yeah.
There's no justice in this world, right?
Well, it's like the Serious Fraud Office prosecutions against New Zealand First. Well, indeed, the National Party and the Labour Party as well, where the Serious Fraud Office tried to shoehorn Electoral Act or alleged Electoral Act offences into the Crimes Act, turned the law inside out and upside down, and unsurprisingly lost at every step of the way.
Yeah, but here's the rub. When they went for the Labour Party on that art auction, even the court judge said, so to the Serious Fraud Office, so where's your evaluation of the artwork? So they're running a case, but they don't have an evaluation for the artwork because they intend to lose the case. If they had done evaluation of the artwork, there'd have been a different outcome. But how can you be a Serious Fraud Officer and go in a case like that when staring out that this artwork that's probably only worth about 5 cents is going for $40,000? They had to do an evaluation, and they didn't do it. Now, please don't tell me this is a first world type of serious fraud operation.
Well, it's not that serious, is it? When there's glaring errors like that. But again, what we're seeing is a propensity of government organisations to turn laws inside out and upside down. They did that during COVID with the lockdowns. The Health Act says that the Director General of Health can isolate someone who is sick.
Yes.
And they extended that to let's isolate everybody, lock you all up in your apartments and your houses, and you can't go anywhere because you might get sick.
Ah, yes. It was quite incredible. I mean, when we didn't know, I can understand that period. It's the famous president of the United States. His name was Roosevelt, and he's starting after the Great Depression with a New Deal, and he said something that we should always remember in politics. He said, we may not always get it right, but we'll keep on trying. Well, that's not what happened in New Zealand. They said from day one, we know, you don't, we'll get it right.
You had the podium of truth.
And the rest is history.
I can remember, I snipped it at the time. I've still got the video. Jacinda Ardern saying, there's a lot of rumours out there that we're going to have lockdowns. They're not true. Unless you hear it from us, unless you hear it from our voices, it's not true. It's misinformation. This was, she was in Hamilton at the time campaigning, and 2 days later she was sitting there with the photo of Michael Joseph Savage over her shoulder, treating us all like preschoolers and saying we're all in lockdown. Well, she knew 2 days before that.
Yeah.
So you know, I remember her in 2017 saying, you know, she'd never told a lie in her political career. Well, that was the first one right there.
Well, it's, how shall I put it? Would she have deliberately lied? The answer to that probably is no, but she should never put herself in a situation where she had a gainsay or retract on her own words because she didn't have the experience to understand what was going to happen next. That's the reality of it all. Politics is all about being like a navigator on a rally drive, like a car or car race. It's not the next corner you worry about. It's the corner and the corner and the corner and the corner after that. And you've got to see around that corner. And I see so many in politics who don't realize they keep on talking about unforeseen consequences. No, they're totally foreseeable because somebody will have made that mistake before.
Well, it's like the healthy homes issue, isn't it? You know, Grant Robertson came out and said, "Oh, look, we don't think that the landlords will pass on the costs of upgrading their properties to healthy homes." I don't know what planet he lives on, but it doesn't have blue sky.
Well, you're quite right, actually. How shall I say? I would look back in the 35, 40, 1940, 45 Labour government, and those people were practical because they were some group of people who had done a lot of practical work. When they're talking about housing, they knew what they're talking about. Same with the National Party in the 50s. Those people knew what they were talking about. Then along come a whole lot of educated theorists, so to speak, who couldn't run the school tuck shop, and now they're running the country.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest vandals of New Zealand society was Simon Upton.
I can remember.
He probably doesn't like that, but he's the architect of the Resource Management Act, and there's been more damage done to New Zealand society by the Resource Management Act than anything else.
Well, no, to be honest with you, he inherited most of that draft was in the previous government. He inherited. His job was to fix it. But no, they just grabbed hold of it and went ahead with it. And as you know, it was enormously costly to New Zealand, all over New Zealand, because there were no what you might call nationwide standards. Half the time it depended where you were. You could get this in the Northern Regional Council, and you couldn't get it in the Southern Regional Council. You get it somewhere else, you get all these permissive decisions were an enormous handicap. And the longest one was 28 years for a supermarket on the North Shore. 28 years waiting.
That's ridiculous. It reminds me of the building of the Maori Bridge. You know, for years it was just held up by a few stroppy unions. You know, just incredible progress has been halted by rascals. Really. Yeah,
it's a sad part of New Zealand's development, the irresponsibility of certain employers, but also the terrible irresponsibility of certain working unions and how they behaved as though their job was to obstruct everything rather than try and build something. And I say that as a former delegate for the Labourers Union when I was much younger.
Much younger and not as wise.
That's the most lowly union in the country.
Speaking of just touching back on foreign policy, have you heard from Beijing Bob Carr yet?
No.
So that's 2 out of 2.
Well, see, I said to the media, you made a hell of a lot of noise and you had all these headlines when you thought I was going to get done, but you can't even read the document. He didn't say he's going to sue me. He was saying, I'm going to talk to my lawyers and see what they think they should do.
Yeah, obviously, they've told him to don't even think about it.
Well, I was getting all these Aussie lawyers ringing up and saying, Winston, I want to act for you.
Yeah. You were probably relishing the discovery process of his bank accounts.
That's my point. I know what discovery is like, and it's devastating. And no, you don't. You've got the impression that you're going to sue, but you're not even telling me that. I didn't bother to reply to him, you know. And here we are. It's now, I think, 72 days.
Well, you'd know. You're keeping count.
Roughly, yeah, I know, but the time was much as by. Now, look, I've got a pre-cabinet meeting because I've got a cabinet at 11.
Yep. That's all right. I just got another couple of questions for you, to round out. You're a busy man. This is local. What do you think is going on with inside the Green Party?
Well, actually, they're an unholy mess, but they survive because they're not exposed by the media who don't do their job. Where's Darlene Tana? How can she be away all these months on the taxpayer? And how can she have cost $42,000 of the taxpayers' money in the case that they were using against her, the Greens? This is rotten. This stinks. and we haven't those internal matters. We pay for it ourselves. But no, this is extraordinary. And one case after case after case after case, and there they are standing up, and they're not affected by the polls because they're not being properly scrutinised, as some of us are, overly scrutinised.
Yeah, if you look at the treatment of Jamie Lee Ross by Tova O'Brien in an interview on television, just appalling behaviour. Compare that with John Campbell's soft rub of a flannel with Golriz Garriman. Jamie Lee Ross is never convicted of anything. She has been convicted and sentenced.
In Golriz's case, though, like I looked at this case from across the divide. I looked at the body language, and I thought, you belong to a political party that spends all its time saying you love people, you care, and you have a heart. And you've demonstrated to me in that case that you know nothing about how to handle people. If I was an employer with someone like that, you'd have isolated it very quickly and tried to sort it out, because she did have a problem. That's clear as daylight. But this party that keeps on saying that they're the only ones you can trust demonstrated how vacuous they are about real people's issue when it comes to Golriz. So I've never said a word about Golriz, like to think, but basically she's a victim of a party that promises everything but cannot treat people properly.
I did think, though, that her excuse saying I wanted out of politics was rather trite. She had an opportunity at the last election to get out of politics by not standing. And you can always write a letter of resignation. But she said she went shoplifting so she would get out of politics. I thought that was very strange.
Well, you could say all those things, but what I'm saying was, looking at her mental condition, I can understand why she's still making statements that don't make sense to anybody. But, I just looked at as a more experienced person and watched it, and I thought, hang on, I've had people who have had problems, and some of them have been medical problems, but I've said to them, they wanted to resign. And I said to them, no, you've got a bad back. You've got to go and have an operation. So you're off for 4 months, it won't matter. Get your back fixed up. A lot of chances like that, and people management is critical. In the Francis report about parliamentary behaviour and the political parties, only one party survived. And because of that, Mallard didn't go public with it. The only party survived the Francis report was a party called New Zealand First.
And speaking of parties that may not survive, Te Pati Maori and the shenanigans going on with Manurewa Marae and Waipareira Trust and all of the murk that's around that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's massive illegalities, clear as daylight, from the census to the use of the census information, the illegality there, and then the preferential use of that information for political purposes, illegality there. And then you've got the fact that a well-known name and biggest names in New Zealand, Maori politics, NRA, lost by 42 votes. It tells me he was robbed of his seat illegally. Then you've got 350,000 of taxpayers' charity money given to a political party, which is illegal. Now, what are the authorities doing about any of that right here, right now?
Well, they're just talking about having meetings, I think, at the moment, aren't they?
But it's disgusting. It's disgusting how inert they have been when they've been so ready to criticise other parties without one shred of evidence. But
they go and prosecute New Zealand First and a few other people at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, they prosecuted New Zealand First and didn't even go and question the leader. The full-on attack on one guy, I know that, me.
Yeah.
Didn't have the guts to even interview me. Why?
Is the core problem what we started talking about, the Fourth Estate and the lack of their rigour in certain areas?
Well, the Fourth Estate didn't even cover our trial because it started to look like they were going to lose.
Well, it was obvious from the beginning they were going to lose.
Yeah. How do you don't have to like someone. The job is to cover it off. I'm just seeing an election in France. Now, the far right have done extraordinarily well, but they weren't shut out because of media lack of coverage any more than the hard left were. Now, Trump came in third, but the hard right and the hard left still got their coverage in the French media. New Zealand is different.
No, they like using labels, and then they use those labels to silence you. I mean, they call you a populist like it's a bad thing.
I used to say to them when I was much younger, give me a break. Do you know anybody that sets out, any person that I know, that wants to be unpopular?
Well, especially politicians, they always want to be popular.
Yeah, but if you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a news broadcaster, you want to be popular. But no, it's a slight, you see, because it suggests somehow you can't be trusted because you understand people, you read the room better than most. So therefore you can't be trusted because you don't exhibit the same ignorance as I do as somebody who can't. I got to go.
On that note, Winston, thank you very much for coming on The Crunch. It's a pleasure to have you again.
No, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodness, Winston was in fine form there. But let's be frank, he is delivering, particularly for the freedom movement. I was pleasantly surprised to hear some compassion from him too regarding Golriz Garriman. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Nathan Smith has been a journalist for NBR and worked for the New Zealand Initiative before being cancelled during the pandemic. He's now a freelance writer and shares with us his experience of cancellation and thoughts on how to change policy agendas and the problems with our media in New Zealand. Nathan joins me now. Welcome to The Crunch, Nathan.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
So 2020, you had a bit of a serious year. That was the same year everybody was copping a flogging from the Ardern regime, but in the middle of all that, you got cancelled from your job at the NBR. Tell us a bit about that.
It was the initiative at the time, down in Wellington. I had moved from the NBR where I spent the better part of a decade being a business journalist. The initiative picked me up and I went there to be the chief editor, which was fun. I really enjoyed those guys.
So the initiative was the replacement for the Business Roundtable, right?
It was,
but without the balls.
Correct. Yeah. That's probably a good way to put it. In 2020, while everybody else was stuck at home, I suddenly had an email asking me for my comment on all these very ad hoc clipped pieces that they're taken from a blog. What was my opinion on this? It turns out the blog was mine.
Yeah.
I've been maintaining it since about 2007. We're talking 15 years of writing, millions of words. By the way, the audience on the blog was a piddling maybe 6 or 7 on each post. It was really like an online diary for me. I was just writing opinions and stuff. But
musing about things.
Of course.
Hypothesizing, kind of like your articles on the BFD.
Correct. I work for you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get all my great writings. So like I say, the pieces of the articles, millions of words, they had gone through, and I don't know how much they read. I wouldn't have wanted to read my entire blog, so I pity them the job doing that. But they managed to find some nasty things they said. And what was my comment on these? I had no comment because my policy is I don't talk to journalists. There's no good reason ever to talk to a journalist.
That's good advice. That's one I give to politicians when they come at me and say, I've got this journalist trying to contact me about something. I said, well, so what?
Ignore them.
Just ignore them. Don't answer the phone. There's no rule that says you have to answer a journalist's question. And so that's really good advice. Do not speak to journalists.
Because I know the way it goes because I was on the other side of the fence for my whole career. It's where I cut my teeth. And I know that as soon as you send an email out to somebody or ask them for comment, you've already written the story. You can't change their mind.
Yeah, what you're wanting is instead of the last line saying we've contacted Nathan Smith for comment, you want the last line to say, the last paragraph to say we contacted Nathan Smith for comment and he said no comment.
Yeah.
And then they've honoured their ethos or their ethics or whatever it is that they've contacted you and given you a fair chance to but that's never fair, is it?
It's never fair. They already know where they're going. They've already written the story in the way they want, and there's no changing their minds. So really it was a pedestrian hit piece, but it was against me this time, so I'd never felt that. And the bizarre thing about the position that I was in was that I really didn't have a good philosophy of what my change in role was. It's like I said, for 10 years I was on the other side of the curtain. I was the journalist. I was the guy that called people for the comment. Other people were the story, not me. So to suddenly be the story was actually a bit of a shock. I was like, I wasn't quite prepared for that. Thankfully, I had a good philosophy. I play chess, so I know sort of how this sort of plays out.
Yeah.
So I knew what my response would be should that ever happen, and it did happen. But it was still a little bit like, whoa, I'm the story now. That must mean I'm important, because following journalists' own philosophy, they don't punch down, right? So they always punch up.
Of course they don't.
So by their logic, I must have been someone important. And this kind of, at the time, was a bit of a, like I say, a shock to me. That was probably the most shock.
A revelation.
Anyway, the initiative didn't help. I resigned immediately, mainly because I felt that at that point there were about 11 to 15 other people who were more important than me at that place. And I still like those guys. I still think they do a good work. The whole point of not talking to journalism at all is to pull the wind out of their sails, to completely deflate it, to end it as quickly as possible.
I mean, that's right. Every time I get a call from David Fisher, I just don't answer it.
Yeah.
Right. Every time I get a call from some journalist, unless I know them and I trust them, which it's a very short list. It can be counted on the fingers of one hand.
With fingers left over.
With fingers left over. I just don't talk to them because they've already written a story. They're just trying to get your comments so they can tick the box for their editor to say, have you contacted Slater? It's bullshit, right? It's a game, and I know what that game is because I've played it, and you know that game because you've played it.
So I'm already there in my head. And the advice I got was, well, are you a cage fighter? And I thought, no, I don't really want to play this out in public. So I resigned and went to go do something else. I'll get to the blessing in a moment, but they did try to pull it out. They did try to push the wind in those sails a little bit more. I think I actually didn't end up reading any of the articles that they put out after that about me, but they kept trying to do it for that week. In that week, we're talking sort of the end of 2020. It was me on the news, and one of my cousins, said his wife said, that's not a good thing, is it? When she saw my face on, say, One News or Three News or whatever, and my cousin said, no, it's probably not a good thing at all. But I was everywhere, and it was one of those weird, almost Truman Show moments where you are sort of walking around, and you, naively think everybody knows who I am. No one knows who you are. In fact, we'll get to this later as well.
No one knows, and
no one
cares.
reads the media. So again, I'm sort of trying to sort of rationalize this in my head. So this was my decision. I did jump ship. I went to go do something else. I was pushed, but I also jumped at the same time. I'm not going to talk about it. So anything that comes is completely my fault from now on. So that's where I sort of moved. And, you were probably one of the first people on that day to actually give me a call and say, mate, I know how you feel. And, I've got a lot of time for you. Let's have a talk. Let's keep this conversation going. It's all nonsense. You had your sources telling me sort of what was going on. And it really was the end of the hit piece. I made sure it ended. Yeah,
because you suffocated the oxygen from the story by not talking to the media. And this is what when people ask me for advice on how to deal with the media, that's the only single piece of advice I give them. Do not speak to them.
There's never a good reason. You may think there's a good reason, but let me just remind you that when you're buying ads or marketing or you're engaging with a PR, you have debt. When something happens and the journalist calls you up, you have a debt to pay. And now all that money that you've spent for the good messaging in the media gets reversed, and now you have to defend yourself from the bad things. If you had just not gotten involved with the media in the first place, you would have no debt.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, it's always a bad move to get involved with the media. And that's not a nice thing to hear if you're in PR or you're in marketing, because that's their livelihood. But anybody who engages with them is accruing a certain kind of debt, and that has to be paid back.
I mean, I always say to people, if David Fisher's ringing you, it's not good news.
No, never.
Right? I said, but here's the thing, right, is that he always plays both sides of the story, just not in the time frame that you want it to be. So, and that's the important thing here to understand, is that news doesn't just happen. It usually comes from a person with an axe to grind who calls a journalist and says, I think this is a story. The journalist agrees with that axe to grind, then decides to construct the story and then go, oh, well, we better get the other side of this to see if there is anything. And they're hoping that you're going to say something, so they'll take it out of context and put in. And that's the other thing, always do interviews live. That's what I always say. If you have to talk to a journalist, do it live.
Yeah, they've got no time to
Edit it.
research, edit. Edit is an insidious thing. But I agree. Look, I've for a long time thought there's no such thing as investigative journalism.
No, it's axe to grind.
There's always a source, there's always a leak, and there's always an axe to grind. And no journalist is going out there, like Tintin, trying to find stories. That doesn't happen.
It's cartoonish. These claims by the media bosses that we're holding, it's speaking truth to power. We're holding the powerful to account, and any other sort of bumper sticker slogan that they like to chuck out there. It's all bullshit, right? They're there to fill the gaps between the advertising spaces that they couldn't sell. And that's what a story is. It's the gap in between the advertising.
Yep. So, I mean, beyond that, as you introduced me, I am a freelance writer. I agree with David Graeber. If you can't describe your job in 3 words, you have a bullshit job. And so when people ask me, what do? I say, I'm a writer. Yeah. And I'll always be a writer.
I just say editor usually when people ask me.
Yeah, look, and it's fun. I'll never not write. I enjoy it. I get better. It's one of those artworks, I suppose, that you get better at as you age. And I think, you can't write and not read, so I read a lot as well. And that's one of the hardest things in my life, which is why I enjoyed working at the initiative when I did, is because I'm usually the most well-read person in any room, which also ironically makes me the most right-wing person in any room, usually, which is why I was attacked. Yeah. But, one of the reasons they said they were attacking me. But it's to be rewarded with the job of writing for someone like me is pretty big. So I've still got a handful of places where my pieces move. I've actually done, as we were just talking before, more investigative work through my freelance world than I have ever did when I was in MBR, in the real mainstream media. But I write lots of cool technical stuff. I work for a lot of companies. I've seen some amazing things. Sometimes I write ads, although back to my philosophy before, it's always nice to be on one side, but not the other side. Yeah. And I just enjoy writing, and no one's going to hold me down from doing that. It's what I'm good at. I have something to say rather than need to say something. That's, I'm not a social media whore. I don't just jump on social media and put out any opinion I want. Most of the times it's considered, it's well researched. I have to say it because it's important to say. And I hope my readers enjoy it.
Well, that was the problem with COVID, wasn't it? Is that the media acted as censors on behalf of the government and decided what we would talk about, what we would discuss, and what would be not discussed at all. And we saw even stuff in recent years has taken an editorial line that the argument over climate change is no longer an argument, that the science is settled, which is a joke when you think about it. And therefore, they were no longer going to publish opinion pieces from people who had a contrarian view to their editorial position. And we saw exactly the same thing happen in COVID, which led to I think it led to the excesses of the Ardern regime, because there weren't people in the media baying at them for these totalitarian excesses. They got away with it. And they largely got away with it because they took bribes.
Yeah, look, COVID was a strange time. I think what happening to me at the same time as COVID, and then seeing how it sort of all played out as well with the freedom movement, I think a lot of people can resonate with my experience. There was cancelling at a national scale. A lot of people lost family members, lost jobs, lost
businesses,
marriages, businesses, lots of things. Although it was directed at me, I was amongst the mass cancelling, and the media was behind a lot of that. I do like to sort of think about COVID was one out of the box. It won't probably happen again because
they'll try.
You can't do
they'll try.
You can't do it the same way twice. But I think it's good to sort of think about it from a different way. If it wasn't a virus that had a 99.999% non-fatality rate, survivability rate, if it was, in other words, slightly worse than a cold, if it actually was killing, let's say 3%, maybe 4%, if you want to bump it up to 10, you can. Let's say if it was really, really bad pandemic, you would actually want the government to act in the way it did. The problem was that it wasn't a virus with that sort of lethality, and the media knew.
But if it was a virus with that lethality, as they've shown from research in places like Equatorial Africa and a lot of Asian places, when you get this, a virus is a very serious outbreak like Ebola or something like that, it doesn't last very long.
Well, it doesn't spread.
Because it burns itself out. And as soon as you hear that the next village has got Ebola in there, then you just shut down your village. You don't let anybody from that village come. You don't let anybody else go anywhere, and it burns itself out because it's so lethal. It eventually burns itself out.
Well, that's my point.
You don't need a government to act because common sense kicks in, right? And that was the approach Sweden took. They said, you don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to have a vaccine. Yeah. Carry on socialising. If you're sick, stay at home.
Yeah, it was nice to have a counterpoint, data point of Sweden to show that actually you didn't need to lock down in the way they did. But the only reason I sort of frame it in that is to remind people that actually when big things happen that really do threaten civilian lives, you do actually, that's what you pay the government for, right? The government's sole job, their first core responsibility is security. And shutting down would have been great if it was a more lethal and more spreadable virus. It wasn't. And I think now we're seeing, as a lot of the papers that are coming out afterwards, the media knew at the time, and their censorship actually led to overreach of the state, not just in New Zealand, but in Australia, Canada, most of the Western countries, and I would say developing countries as well. China is a little bit of an outlier because it's a monarchy anyway, so it can do whatever it wants. But in supposed representative democracies, you would have thought that there would be some balance, but there never was.
So we're always told that the fourth estate exists to act as that balance against egregious use of power by politicians.
Yeah.
And in this instance, we saw in New Zealand in particular that the media largely were all in lockstep.
And we saw, I think, what a lot of people are still grappling with, that there is no fourth estate, or at least it's not the fourth, it's the first. The media is the most powerful piece of, I would say, the civil service, because you can actually connect. Because let's just put it this way. If I wanted to advocate, if I want to set up my own newspaper to advocate for monarchy or a theocracy, could I get state funding to do it? No. So in other words, as a journalist, as a media entity, should I set one up, it must follow the state's message. So now who's in control of the state's message, me or the state? It's the journalist. So when, and again, in a representative democracy, the control of people's minds through propaganda and information, if you want to call it that, decides votes. So if you are in control of people's minds, you decide the country's direction. So in my mind, the logic where that plays out is the fourth estate is actually the most powerful estate. And we saw that, I think, during COVID, during every election, but definitely during COVID. They decided the direction of the country. Not only was Bloomfield running the country for almost 3 years, he was getting his marching orders. He had to be deferential to the media. He still had to turn up to the press conferences. He still had to tell everybody what he was doing. The media could have cancelled him or could have put a bullhorn in his mouth. Either way, they control the direction of New Zealand. And that's still, by the way, going on. That hasn't changed since COVID. It's just gotten more entrenched.
Yeah, that's what people say to me. If only Winston Peters had not chosen Jacinda Ardern for the government, we would have had a national-led government in the pandemic. And I said, well, just hold on a minute there, right? I said, you're presuming that they would have done anything different, right? So firstly, Winston Peters didn't choose Jacinda Ardern. Bill English failed to negotiate, right? So he was tits at negotiating and he ended up in opposition. And then he subsequently quit. But if he'd been the Prime Minister when the pandemic came, where would he have got his advice from? Well, he would have got it from Ashley Bloomfield. He would have got it from Tony Blakely. He would have got it from all of the same people, the pink-haired walrus from Auckland University, would have got all those same people would have been providing information to the Prime Minister, and he would have done exactly the same thing, because people misunderstand that politicians are smart, and then they're not. They're just not smart, right? So they rely on experts, and so it's the experts that drive everything, and the politicians make the decision on what they're going to accept, but they only get usually one set of experts.
Well, the way I think about it is, who has more power, the person that writes the speeches or the person that reads the speeches?
Yeah.
It's been that way, by the way, since ancient Greece.
No, but you know this, right? When you were a journalist at NBR or even at the New Zealand Initiative, you would have received press releases from all the politicians. And when you see the avalanche of press releases that come in, and it literally is an avalanche, you have a look at them, and they follow a standard format, right? The government is announcing such and such. The eminent, amazing minister says this, right? And then there's a quote, and then there's another policy thing, and the minister adds da-da-da. The minister didn't say those things, right? He didn't come up with those words.
Probably wasn't even in the same room.
Probably not. All he did is put his initial on the press release, say, yep, I'm okay with that, that goes out. It was written by some functionary in his office, and these words and quotes appear in news articles, such and such said this minister said that. They never said it at all. But they have to own those words because it's come out of their office. But it literally is a factory of producing soundbite quotes that can be used in news articles. And often when you get the press release and then you look at the subsequent news article, you find it's almost verbatim.
Yep.
Almost verbatim. But the news article has, David Fisher's byline on it or some other person's byline on it, as if they wrote the press release.
Yeah, the civil service operates on process, whereas a king or a prime minister you would expect would run on executive decision. There is no decision-making process in the process of the civil service. Everything either goes sideways or up to your manager. You don't do anything based on your own initiative. It's just the way it goes. And while that's fine, you can think of the civil service as a giant supertanker floating down the ocean. When the information came out during COVID that it clearly wasn't as scary as everyone thought it was, that maybe we took a little bit of a panic decision here. The process was already in place to lock down, to shut New Zealand's borders, to make sure everybody wore masks. The civil service was already gearing up. It's really hard to turn a supertanker when it's traveling at full speed. Real supertankers can take kilometers to change course. So as a metaphor, it would actually take 2 to 3 years for the civil service to get out of its own crazy pattern of thinking and change direction for how we approach COVID. So everything that I see that happened from 2020 onwards, not only just to me, although everybody else can sort of resonate with this, wasn't necessarily down to decisions being made at an executive level across the civil service. It's just following process. And everybody knows that the Ministry of Health was where you go if you're a civil servant, if you are a loser and you can't do anything else. Yeah. Before COVID, it was where everyone was kicked sideways until they couldn't fall off the paper anymore. That was the Ministry of Health. Even John Key used to talk about it with, sideways glances. Everybody knew it was where the retards were, excuse my language. But it was clearly shown during COVID because they had no clue what to do. But when the process got going, they were even more incompetent because they couldn't even follow their own damn processes.
But there's no geniuses in the civil service.
You don't go into the civil service if you're smart.
Or
you do not.
Or ambitious.
You don't. Maybe in Singapore you do because they actually fund you to go to places like Oxbridge or any of the Ivies and stuff to come back so that you are the best to run their country. But it's a city state. In New Zealand, you go to the civil service if you have nothing to do and you cannot make it in private industry. That's just the way that goes.
And you like living in Wellington.
It's full of midwits. And, Wellington, no one likes living in Wellington. If they say they do, they always claim that it's great on a good day. But that's all they can say about it. And I'm being slightly facetious, but boy, the wind gets into your soul down there. But I would say
it's a lazy wind too. It just goes straight through you.
And the civil service is really, like I say, it's responsible for a lot more than I think normal Kiwis give it credence for. I think a lot of Kiwis did see the size of the state during COVID. Some of them felt it in their lives, painfully. And it deserves a better kind of person. And I think if you are interested in New Zealand's direction in the future, you should think about encouraging your kids to band together with friends and take collective jobs in certain civil services and increase the competency. Learn better. And try and give back to you. You don't have to join the army to give back to the society that gave birth to you. You can go into the civil service. That's why they call it a service. And it needs higher quality people because right now it's full of leftists who have a single direction There's no one to challenge them because prime ministers cannot hire or fire civil servants. They're completely outside that scope of their executive. And they can basically do whatever they want. And when ACT comes in and decides it wants to cut budget and cut the size of the civil servants, ACT is not going to be there for more than a couple of years. Those civil servants will be in career. They've got 40-year careers. They can wait. They'll just move sideways. They'll just be quiet for a couple of years. But the money will continue to flow. This is, by the way, baked in. This is not something we can change. Yeah. So if that's the case, the only thing you can really do if you care for New Zealand's future is encourage better people to be part of the civil service. So that's what I'm encouraging, essentially.
Yeah, see, I get asked, Cam, why don't you become a politician? And I say, I'd rather poke pins in my eyes. Because you get there, every politician I've ever met, and I've met hundreds of them, right? They all tell me they're going to Wellington, they're going to change things, that it's going to be better because they're there. And it never is. Yeah, what happens? They get there and the system starts to grind them. No, you can't do that. This is how we operate Parliament. And all of a sudden, within a week or two, they're becoming institutionalised into the system.
That charismatic little politician is now just a lapdog.
Yeah. And they get down there and then they find that the system just grinds them to a halt. And if you are smarter than the average bear, and I can probably count maybe 5 MPs that I've met over the years that I'd consider to be smart, the system gets them too, because we can't have someone like Maurice Williamson, who's got a Master of Science, understands what radio frequencies are about and all of those things as the Minister of Broadcasting and Communications. Shit, we need to get rid of this guy because he knows more than we do, and he's undermining our progress in this particular initiative or whatever because he's asking questions that we don't want to answer.
Well, the kryptonite for civil service, as I mentioned, is executive decision. They work on process. And that's why and the process, part of the process is you get rid of anybody who decides to work on executive process. They will get rid of Maurice Williamsons. They will get rid of smart people because it doesn't fit the game. And if you don't know how to play the game, you're out. Fine. But like I said, this is all baked in. It's not going to change.
Like you or I down there who we make our own rules for what the game is. We're not playing their game. We don't like your game. We're not playing your game.
Take your ball and go do something else.
Go and do something else if you don't like. See, and that's what happens in the United States, isn't it? When you get a change of government in the United States, you get a new president. All of the department heads, all the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defence, all of those jobs that make up the cabinet are not made up from MPs. They're made up from the people the president trusts.
Political appointees.
And then they say to the minions underneath them, this is the policy now. Fit in or F off. And it works. And there is wholesale sackings every time there's a change of government in the United States, usually every 8 years, right? But sometimes every 4 years.
Yep.
And they sack the people that they believe are going to inhibit their policy agenda and what they're going to do. And we don't have that here. We change our government, and the people who were advising James Shaw 8 months ago are now advising the National Climate Change Minister. It's the same people in the office. And so we don't change those people.
They never change.
And that's what I always say to politicians when you get in there, don't hire anybody who worked in the office before you. Right?
At a minimum.
New people.
Yeah.
Right? Get people that you trust. But, no, they don't. They go and hire journalists who then jump the fence, right? And there's a whole swathe of them now that are sitting there in ministerial offices.
Oh, yeah.
Writing press releases and doing all of those sorts of things, advise, senior press secretary, fancy titles.
Well, I mean, one of the things I saw from behind the curtain as well, working at the think tank, was there's a reason why the media encourages Kiwis to play the political game rather than the policy game. Because the political game, it's easier to cover. There's two sides. A third side, New Zealand under MMP has struggled in the media to actually portray the idea of three sides because it's, for some reason that blows journalists' minds.
There still is two sides though. You've got the heads, which is national, and on the other side of the coin is tails, which is Labour.
Which is actually a civil service.
Right, which is actually the civil service. But it's the same coin.
It is the same coin.
They're different sides, but it's the same coin.
The media.
And so when you go from from red to blue and blue back to red.
Same coin.
It's the same coin.
Yeah.
Right? And the only governments that make changes are those that are dependent for votes on stroppy third parties. But the third parties usually don't last more than a term.
But it's such a waste of energy because I like a lot of the Kiwis I saw during the freedom movement, and I'm one of them. I would proudly say they're core Kiwis, real heartland Kiwis.
Yeah,
the guys that actually matter for New Zealand's future. It was very easy to tie them up to play the politics game because that's where all the energy should go, according to the state and according to the media.
The system.
It is the system. But what I saw was how easy it was to actually play the policy game, and that easiness of getting involved in submissions, of sending emails to your MP, of, again, encouraging your kids to get involved in the civil service.
All the sorts of things that Voices for Freedom did very, very well.
Very well. And it doesn't take a lot of money because all you need to do is have somebody hitting F5 refresh on the keyboard to find out when submissions are ready to go, and you need to have an argument and you need to submit it. And the ship of state, to use my metaphor earlier, will move because they're bound to the representation aspect of democracy. When you put your energy into policy rather than politics, you can do huge things. And sometimes it's actually easier to do bigger things than it is to do smaller things, to change massive pieces of the state rather than incrementally do it, playing in the courts or playing with politics and stuff. This guy gets in, this guy gets out. We move slightly more to the right, we move slightly more to the left. The oscillation of that Overton window sort of thing is a fool's errand because you're not even controlling where the window frame is.
It basically doesn't change, though. I mean, it never changes. It sort of shrinks and contracts a little bit, like a shimmer.
And it inexorably moves left because that's what the civil service is. Yes. It's easier for the civil service to control the state under, again, a processed decision making rather than executive. So that's where it goes. By the way, process is socialism. So of course it goes that way. So if you don't want to get involved in that and you don't want to waste your energy, if you actually believe in the future of New Zealand, I encourage people to get involved in policy. Yeah, because that's very important.
That's the same advice that I give to people too. They say, I want the government to do this. I said, Wes, but what problem are you solving?
Yeah.
Right. You need to give the minister a reason to act. And they're not super smart, these people. So you actually also have to give them the answer that they can choose to act using your answer. And that's where that policy argument comes into, because you've analysed the policy, you see where the gap is that needs to be addressed. You go to the minister, you say, there's a gap here. Look at it. Look at that gap. Oh, it's huge. People are falling through that. You need to stop that. And by the way, here's the policy that will help you do that.
And here's 15,000 other people who agree with me and see the same gap.
And if you do that, they'll do it because it's easier. It's easier than them saying, oh, that's a big gap. I'll get some advice on that. As soon as they say, I'm going to get some advice on that, you're stuffed. You've now no longer got any influence. It's the people giving the advice to the minister that have the influence.
Look, having sounded so dark on civil service, it's only that way because people don't get involved. Really, the civil service is actually there to build, maintain, and strengthen New Zealand. And they are looking for problems to solve. They are a bit like self-licking ice cream cone. Of course, that they will find problems to solve, and then they will make more problems with their solutions.
They'll create problems for them to solve.
But they aren't actually sitting around going, how do we hurt Kiwis? How do we block our ears to Kiwis' problems?
I mean,
they are looking.
They're very earnest, right?
You need to tell them, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're very earnest. A classic example of that sort of policy making, that they want to help Kiwis, is the healthy homes policy that Grant Robertson adopted, right? Said that this is going to be great for tenants, right? Because you can now have a healthy home to live in, right? It's going to be warm, it's going to be dry. And they came up with this amazing policy that was going to cost landlords something like $5,000 or $6,000, right? And then Grant Robertson said perhaps the most stupid thing I ever heard come out of his mouth is, we don't think that the landlords will pass that cost on, that they'll just absorb that. And
anybody who's ever worn a suit would see immediately the fault in that.
Yeah, like seriously, that was never going to work. And also the boffins in Wellington, the civil servants, come up with a solution that almost entirely ignores the human condition, right? Another classic example, I took picked an EP up from the airport once and was driving him to a function. And he said to me, Cam, why are all these utes driving around in Auckland? Why do you have so many utes? I said, because you guys made it worthwhile to drive a ute. What? He really genuinely didn't know why people drove utes. And so I had to tell him, I said, you made utes exempt from fringe benefit tax because they're trade vehicles and they're always a trade vehicle. If you want to tow the Mrs. Horse float or your jet skis or the boat or do anything with a car and it's a company car, you got to pay fringe benefits tax on it for that. Or you've got to have the back seat bolted down and a cage put in it, and now your car's impractical. But you don't have to do that with a ute. And you don't have to pay fringe benefit tax as well. And they just was like, they were just flummoxed. It was like a revelation to them that the unintended consequence of doing that is more utes were on the road in Auckland.
Yeah.
You gave them the incentive.
Incentives and unintended consequences these are very simple aspects of economics, and anybody can learn them. But, part of my thesis obviously has to be that normal Kiwis, not just get involved in policy, but actually try and understand some of these basics and ways to think, how to think rather than what to think.
But also how to manipulate the civil service because of their processes, understand their processes.
Well, they're there
and
for
then
you.
Use them to manipulate to get the result that you want.
And the thing is a lot of Kiwis think it's so far beyond them. Little old me can't get involved in that, but you can.
You can.
You don't just have to leave it to companies, by the way, who are spending like almost nothing on lobbying government to do what they want. You would think with the consequences of changing a policy, that the price of doing such would be astronomically high, right? If you could actually change policies to make New Zealand go in a different direction, the cost of entry into that should be really high. It's really not. It's less than what you might spend to set up your own company, to buy a new fleet of trucks. Like any small company or mid-sized company can get involved in policy construction for almost nothing. Only the big guys are doing it because they don't want you to know that. And the media doesn't want you to think about that because they realize how easy it is to actually change the direction of the ship of state. They'd rather keep you involved in politics, but it's actually really cheap.
And this is a good point because we've just seen the government announce their, what do they call it? Their Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill, which was a Labour Party initiative, and National has stupidly decided that they're going to move forward with this. Willie Jackson's ecstatic. And the news media are ecstatic because, yay, we're going to get one over the big tech. Well, these people are not living in our world. Right? It's a very Pollyannish idea that they can pass legislation that will make Google and X and Facebook sit down with the New Zealand Herald and decide to pay them fair amounts for their copy. Now, it hasn't worked anywhere in the world. It's like socialism, right? It's never worked anywhere in the world, but countries still try socialism because they just point out, well, it would have worked in Venezuela, but Chavez, he did it wrong. It would have worked in XYZ, but they did it wrong. So we're not going to make those same mistakes. It's going to work this time. Well, a fair digital bargaining bill has been in place in Canada for a number of years. And what did the social media companies do?
Change the algorithm, switch them off.
Switched them off.
Yeah.
In Australia, they did the same thing, switched it off. And that's what will happen. If I was advising Google or Facebook or X on how to deal with this legislation in New Zealand, it would be very simple. Our numbers of social media users are rounding figures for their company, right?
100%.
They don't care.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't care. So what they'll do is they will just switch off the sharing of that news. They'll just switch it off. If you're a user in New Zealand, you'll now no longer get those in your feeds. Yeah. They don't care. It's a rounding figure.
They won't even sniff.
They won't even notice. But the population, and this is where this policy argument comes to, the population will be outraged. The politicians will bear the brunt of it, and that bill will be dropped within a week if they did that.
Right.
And I'd pick they are going to do that.
Yeah, there'll be pushback. I mean, on the bill itself, I think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of where we are in 2024. not only can Kiwis route around any rules you have and get their information from anywhere on the internet, that's how the internet works, how it was set up. A lot of Kiwis, I think, and again, I go back to the freedom community, not only are we more skeptical of the media, I actually know a lot of people who simply have stopped consuming it at all, Kiwi news. Like, what really do you need? If you live in Auckland, do you really need to know about a crime that happened in Waikato? No.
4 days ago.
4 days ago.
That's the thing, right? The news that's on 6 o'clock news is catering to an audience that resembles in demographic the voters of New Zealand First.
And it's habit.
Yeah.
Most people aren't watching the news to be genuinely informed because they can do that better elsewhere. They're watching it because it's 6 o'clock and that's what you do at 6 o'clock while you're cooking the potatoes.
Yeah. Well, it's going to take half an hour for the potatoes to boil. We may as well watch the news.
It takes 6 weeks, according to psychological research, to make a habit. And it takes 6 weeks to break one. Most people were under lockdown for longer than that. A lot of them have lost their habit. And I know a lot of people who have simply, out of vitriol, stopped watching media. And their lives are not only more positive, they are now consuming things that they actually want to. So, like I say, the internet is a global media database, essentially.
But let's just touch on that, on what's happened to Joe Biden after his debate, right? The American public for the last 6 years has been told that Joe Biden's sharp as a tack.
Sure.
Right? He's clever. He commands any meeting that he's in. There's a video on YouTube that just cracks me up. When you actually get all of the strap lines that the media have used to promote Joe Biden over the last few years and produce a 15-second clip with their news item that shows him sharp as a tack, right? Most people who are consuming news that way think that he's sharp as a tack. Well, on Friday, New Zealand time, they got 90 minutes live streamed everywhere that showed Joe Biden has dementia, that he's not sharp as a tack. In fact, he's as dull as the dullest thing you can come up with, right? And he's out to lunch.
Yeah.
And the media are in a blind panic, watching them somersault and perform trapeze acts.
Very cute, yeah.
Because the gig's up. Yeah. Their massaging of the view of Joe Biden was destroyed in about 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes of that debate. And the genie's out of the bottle. And now the public are angry. They are seething because they're saying to the media and to the Democrats, you gaslit us. You gaslit us that this guy was sharp as a tack. And once you realise that the media are bent and you realise that everything you know has come from them, then you realise that everything you know may not actually be true, which means maybe Donald Trump isn't the Antichrist or a devil. I'll now look at this with open eyes. And the gig's up.
The only counterpoint I would have to that is one thing I do know about the public is that they do whatever you tell them to do.
We saw that in COVID.
Yeah, there's no real situation where the sheeple will wake up. One of the big reasons is because...
But you don't need them to all wake up. You just need a certain percentage to wake up.
Yeah, and you need those certain percentage to be active. They need to be actually players rather than fools.
Yeah.
You can't have... And and understand where I'm coming from for this, but you can't just go down in your trucks to Wellington and book a few tent spots on the lawn. That's not being a player. That's being a fool. And I've written about this. You played right into the media's hands who wanted to show that there were some nasty people in New Zealand who were anti-COVID, who were anti-Jacinda, who were anti-everything good in this world,
It didn't matter
democracy.
What the truth was, that there were genuine Kiwis there. It didn't matter.
Yeah. And I appreciate the charisma and the initiative. All of that stuff is fine. That's what you want in soldiers. Actually, you don't want initiative in soldiers. And that's my point. Is that you want somebody who knows what they're doing, who can channel that energy into actual effective changes, and that you want players. You want to be able to, people like yourself who know where the pieces of the puzzle are actually supposed to be and how the machine works. But you want to be, those people were desperate for change, as a lot of Americans are. They see the problem here. But what they are going to be led into is one more trap by the media where they all have to turn up on the voting day and get out their anger by ticking, probably with some fierceness in their pen, the box of Donald Trump, and then they will think they have been successfully gotten rid of the problem. No, you're being a fool. You actually need to spend all your time. So when you spend all of your energy on one day every 4 years in America, every 3 years in New Zealand, you gather it all your hatred and all your energy goes into the election day. You must understand that your enemy, the process-driven socialists, the people who are taking
the civil service,
are working every day. Their energy is being deployed on really effective things all of those 3 years. 365, 24/7.
We can see
you need to do that, but you need to be following somebody. Somebody needs to be saying, I have a direction that I want to take New Zealand. And then you, as the Kiwi people who want to go in that direction, need to then do what he says. You need to follow him. You need to learn how to be followers rather, because you're not a leader. Little miss somebody from Waikato, you're not. I know you're angry at the government for doing what they did, but you're not a leader. You are more likely to be a follower, but you do need somebody who has the charisma who can do that. And it's probably not going to be a politician. And if it was, it would be somebody who knows how to cut the Gordian knot. I'm not saying violence. I'm saying get through the civil service to how it needs to be. And that person's job is to do that. You need to learn how to be a follower because we cannot afford anymore. The hour is getting pretty late. We cannot afford to have more foolish people going off on errands, wasting their energy on enterprises that won't change anything, which is what we're about to see in November in America. And we just saw, what have you got from Luxon?
But we saw that in the last election. We had a so-called freedom movement. It's kind of like, the gay community. It's not actually a community. It's not actually a movement.
A loose network of people who agree on certain things.
But when push came to shove, right, you had Matt King set up his own party. You had Liz Gunn, bless her, set up her party thing, and was so delusional that she thought that they were going to get, 1 million votes, right? She actually said that, right? They're going to get 1 million votes.
It's ambitious.
Right. And Matt King, who said to me on this show, look, I don't believe your poll, Cam. The people who are meeting in the street are saying, yeah, Matt, we're going to vote for you. He came fourth in our poll. He came fourth in a poll that he paid for himself. He came fourth in a poll the mainstream media paid for. 3 polls. I think there might have been 4 polls actually in Northland. Matt King was fourth in every single one of them. And, amazingly, he came fourth and he was gobsmacked. But you had these earnest people with a good idea who thought that the way to make that work was to join the system that they hated.
Yeah, to give energy to the thing they despise. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they failed, it was everybody else's fault. It was a conspiracy. It was this, it was that. No, you didn't have a good idea. And like literally the worst thing you can do, we've seen this before, right? We've seen wealthy people try to start political parties. We saw Colin Craig try to start a political party. He nearly got there, 4%, but he spent a lot of money. The ACT Party has spent millions of dollars, and 30 years later...
Maybe passed one major bill.
They've got 8 MPs.
Yeah.
Right? And the National Party, which their colours should be beige, not blue, right? They just keep grinding on. The Labour Party keeps grinding on. They haven't got any new ideas. Honestly, look at the politicians. What's Christopher Luxon's claim to fame? That he was a chief executive of 3 companies that had monopolies. Come on.
Yeah, look, going back to my point, what could you do? Where could you spend this energy?
I'll tell you what
yourself?
They can do is they can smash that donate button for Reality Check Radio, because we're the only media organisation that's having discussions like this. So the more you support us, the more discussions like this that we can have, that we can shift that Overton window to something that's more appropriate. Through Reality Check Radio, we've seriously lobbied to get the changes to the inquiry. That's a success. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for us. We've had other policy successes, and we've got a whole list of things that we're going to be opposing. as well, this climate change nonsense, digital currencies, all, government ordered digital currencies.
Good to hear.
Facial recognition and digital IDs and all of that. So we're against all of that, right? And we're going to do what the New Zealand Herald and stuff do on their little hobby horses, but these are far more fundamental things that we're going to do. So what can little people do? You keep saying little people can support the leaders, the people with the mouthpieces that have got the audience that can shift that Overton window to something that's more acceptable to New Zealand society.
I read a book last year. I can't remember the author's name, but it was about a Presbyterian minister who got caught up prior to World War II. He was a British Presbyterian minister. He got caught up before World War II in becoming a communist, and he was subversive. He had his own. He was part of an underground media organization. He was the editor. That's how far he got. One of the points he made, which I thought was quite interesting, because he eventually came back around and saw the error of his ways, but I was interested in his journey. And one of the points that he made was, you really can't say you support something or you have supporters if your supporters aren't willing to melt down their wedding rings and send in the gold, which is what the underground communists were doing, the part of the unions, the working class people who had nothing. They were melting down their wedding rings just to support this newspaper. And I thought, that's a really good measurement. I'm not talking about skin in the game. I'm not talking about like put your money where your mouth is. That's loyalty. Something that's really precious to you, which is bigger than you, and you feel you should support it. There really shouldn't be anything stopping you, nothing in your way, no barriers to get there. And by the way, I'm not just talking about money. Let's say one of your kids is really smart. Well, put him up for mayor.
Yeah, or
get him to
get them to write an algorithm that's going to
join the police and become the police chief. Do you know anything that you can vote in locally that gets real change? Like look at Mayor Brown in Auckland. Like he's still being puppet stringed by a lot of the people in Wellington because he doesn't have a huge amount of power, because he doesn't have the huge amount of support in Auckland. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It comes from support. And when you have the ability to vote someone in and then support them locally, they have an inordinate amount of power. And I mean, you need to learn how to be a follower so that you can find the right leaders. And I think a lot of Kiwis take individualism way too seriously. They don't understand that you need to be a good soldier. You need to learn how to do that. And we're too narcissistic, too selfish, whatever. We all want to be the leader. We all want to be the guy that everyone cheers.
Well, we believe the egalitarian ethos of New Zealand that Jack's as good as his master, but that's not true.
That's not how to win.
But that's not true.
It's not true. And it's also a message that your enemies would tell you if they wanted you to lose, right? Okay, and they know that, by the way. Again, if you're not willing to melt down your wedding ring and send it into the communist newspaper, you can't call yourself loyal, and you can't really call yourself decided on the position that you want to take the country. You obviously don't want it if you're not doing everything to get it there. And I'm not talking about being frivolous. I'm talking about being strategic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really big lesson of COVID. It's my lesson of the cancellation, if you want to call it that way, is that you have to have a plan before you go into something, and you have to know what you do when something hits, and then you have to be loyal. And by the way, I know who all my enemies are now, which is great. The great unveiling, you could say. A lot of people feel that way about COVID as well. Not just enemies, but they don't. They at least know who their friends are.
We got to see them.
And that, to me, is a blessing, because you will probably never get a chance like that in the rest of your life to really get that filter going, and to know who will stand with you and who will turn on you, probably send the feds around to your house when you're not wearing a mask. To know that it was some of the people closest to you who didn't have the attitude that you thought they would was shocking to a lot of people. Well, but what a blessing.
I mean, that's what Jordan Peterson said. I mean, it's probably fitting to end the interview with a sort of a quote from Jordan Peterson. He said during COVID, everyone would say, "Oh no," if you asked them about Anne Frank or Oscar Schindler, "Oh yes, I would have been like that." Right? I'd be like that person. I would have protected Anne Frank. I would have hidden her. But COVID showed us that actually they would have been snitches. They would have been the person who dobbed in Anne Frank. They would have been the person who dobbed in Oscar Schindler. They would have been the person who condemned thousands of Jews to death in the camps, because COVID showed us that's what people do. And Jacinda Ardern implored everybody to snitch, didn't she?
Yeah, and it behooves us to remember all those lessons. Everybody, the system's trying to rob you of your memory. It's trying to even gaslight you into misremembering what actually happened. Remember those years, because you'll probably never get another chance to see that filter again. And build on it. Build on it. Don't forget it and allow good voices and good energy just to be pushed back into politics, where it's just going to get soaked up and people you don't like are going to be in control, using your energy against you again.
And that includes other media. Right? They're part of that system that wants to gaslight you.
Yeah.
And they're still doing it.
You support the things you love, put it that way.
Yeah. And on that note, Nathan, thank you for coming on The Crunch.
Thanks for having me.
What a fascinating discussion. You can see now why Nathan writes for me. He is perhaps one of the biggest thinkers currently writing about politics and culture in New Zealand. He's one of us too, and now you can understand his thinking as well. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
People are struggling to have conversations and connect with others that they don't completely agree with on every topic. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we need to try and solve, is how after all this division and after all this separation do we end up bringing people together again, and what does unity really look like?
New Zealand faces some pretty big issues. First one is COVID and the aftermath. There's no getting away from that. Second is racial division. It's been ginned up and it's dangerous. Another issue that maybe people haven't got their head around yet is digital currency. What form does that take? Is it programmable? Will it be used to manipulate behaviour and patterns of behaviour? Those questions need to be asked and answered.
How can you have fair, open, democratic government by people who are appointed? It's a ridiculous idea. And if that idea is taken to its zenith, then this country is in real trouble, because democracy, one person, one vote, where every vote is of equal value, has got to be the foundation of a modern New Zealand.
What's true, what's not true, how our kids are to be educated. And, I have a great fear for the future. I think we know from history where this could end up.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Olivia Pierson is back with Olivia's Views. She's here now. Olivia, welcome back to The Crunch. What have you got for us this week?
Oh, thanks, Cam. Well, no surprises perhaps from our listeners, but I'm going to be talking about the state of America after the debate. I'll just launch right in. Yeah. The media world suddenly understood what many of us have been saying since the 2020 election. Joe Biden has dementia. The Democrats are seriously running an old man with dementia, not once, but twice, hoping no one will notice, and thereby thumbing their noses at American voters. Actually, it's much worse than that. Democrats didn't care who noticed. They are that cynical and done with democracy. It was first evident to me just how done with democracy they were when, in Trump's third State of the Union speech in February of 2020, Nancy Pelosi stood up at the end and dramatically ripped up the speech in front of the cameras. That was the moment I really held my breath and I thought, uh-oh, whatever comes next is going to be really bad. What we got by that year's end was a stolen election using fraud at an industrial level of organisation, and the man with dementia was installed into the White House. For anyone who doubts that Joe Biden's dementia was that bad back in 2020, I give you these words which he spoke at a public pool, which had just been named for him while campaigning in Delaware, his home state. He was surrounded by fresh-faced little black kids, and he regaled them with a clumsy anecdote about when he was a big, tough lifeguard taking on some petty gang leader called Corn Pop. I quote, And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain and said, you walk out there with that chain and you walk up to the car and I say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. I said, you kidding me? He said, no. So I walked out with the chain and I walked up to my car. And in those days, remember, you had the straight razors and you bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart. Then I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you to get off the board, you get off the board or I'll kick you out. Unquote. This surrounded by young kids. In the same speech, he then came out with this gibberish.
And by the way, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Yes, I bet Mr. Sniffy loved kids jumping on his lap and rubbing down his leg, just as he loved taking showers with his daughter, according to Ashley Biden's leaked personal diary. In the September presidential debate of 2020, moderated by Chris Wallace, then of Fox News, Wallace babysat Biden, who was considered by many at the time to be too fragile to debate Trump, knowing how verbally combative Trump can be. Biden wouldn't answer Wallace's question about whether or not he intended to pack the Supreme Court and started speaking to the camera instead in a lame effort to sidetrack Americans by encouraging them to go out and vote. Trump interrupted, asking, "Are you going to pack the court, Joe? Are you going to pack the court with radical left justices? Why won't you answer the question? Answer the question, Joe." Biden got visibly flustered and flummoxed, then snapped, "Will you shut up, man?" Then added as a lame rejoinder, "This is so unpresidential." Indeed, he was excruciatingly unpresidential. So if Joe was considered fragile in that 2020 debate, and he was, it is little wonder the debate of a few days ago, 4 years later, had an extremely unusual format. One where the mics of the two candidates were controlled by the moderators so there could be no chime-ins or unwanted confrontations. Yet even with such extreme lengths to avoid Joe becoming flummoxed, his dementia was dismally clear to all.
Make sure that all those things we need to do, childcare, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
Biden's condition has deteriorated dramatically. I wonder how many COVID boosters he's had. But the only thing in truth that has recently changed is that the media are now willing to say that Biden has dementia, whereas before now, that was a phrase that they wouldn't utter on the networks. The media militantly covered for him, willfully participating in the great hoax that he has been capable of leading the free world as commander-in-chief. I'd be surprised if Biden has been allowed to make a single decision outside of which flavor ice cream he wants, which begs the question, who has really been running America for the last 3.5 years? If I had to hazard a guess, I would say Obama. He and Big Mike never left the Capitol, which is a first for a former president. Usually they go back to where they came from, and in the case of the Obamas, that would be Chicago, or in Barack Hussein's case, maybe Kenya. After not leaving DC, the Obamas set up a big swanky office there. Anyone can view the website of the Office of Barack and Michelle Obama at barackobama.com, where the opening message states, "As President Obama has said, the change we seek will take longer than one term or one presidency. Real change, big change, takes many years and requires each generation to embrace the obligations and opportunities that come with the title of citizen." The deep state is a very real phenomenon, and I would not be at all surprised if Obama were acting as a shadow president to the man with dementia who carried that big change forward after the shock of Trump's 2016 win. They must not let that happen again, and it will happen if a free and fair election takes place. So what now for the Bidens, now that it is obvious to all that the emperor has no brain? The Democrat National Convention is due to be held in August, where Biden and his presumptive vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, will need to become the actual nominees for the 2024 ballot. Even though they won their primaries earlier in the year, it doesn't officially become actual until after the Democratic National Convention, that the states can begin to print their names on the ballots, which cannot be altered in some states, short of one of them dying. A precarious position for Biden to be in, actually. If the Democrats invoke the 25th Amendment to say Biden is not mentally fit enough to continue as either president or the nominee for the November election, that requires a judgment call from the vice president to bring that before the cabinet or a body approved by Congress. But nobody really wants to see Kamala, the cackling DEI airheadian, become the first female president, as her stultifying silliness is as obvious as Biden's dementia. So if Biden withdraws, as many are advising him to do, the Democrat National Committee will have to nominate another candidate before the convention and convince all the delegates to vote for that candidate. It will not automatically fall to Kamala. Frankly, that circus would turn the Democrat Party upside down and open them up to all kinds of legal disputes among the delegates and vying nominees if there is more than one. For this reason, I think it is unlikely that Biden's handlers will withdraw him. So the only option open to them, if he's not withdrawn, is the Democrats knowingly running a dude with dementia for president, and considering they've already done this once, and since they really do have no honor left, Trump will undoubtedly become president once more. That means that when Trump goes for his scheduled sentencing on July 11th for the non-crime that saw him slapped with the term convicted felon, the urgency to send him to prison will be enormous. Democrats started this whole ball rolling with all the absurd lawsuits against Trump because they knew he'd beat Biden in a fair competition. The only way they can get the dude with dementia back into the White House is to imprison Trump. But that's a very risky tactic because of the rage it will unleash amongst MAGA supporters. So let's hope he gets bail while appealing his sentence to carry on campaigning without any restrictions on his movement. It is, however, obvious that if the election happened tomorrow, Trump would win in an absolute landslide and deserves to. I don't wish to give them any ideas, but Democrats need either a new pandemic, a massive terrorist attack, a sudden hot war, a black swan event, or a deep space alien invasion to occur between now and November in order to clamp down on Americans, distract everybody, and impose controls to either cancel or overtly mess with another election that they are about to lose. Are they wicked enough to be so brazen? You bet your sweet fanny ass they are. But some great news came through yesterday with the Supreme Court upholding Trump's appeal to presidential immunity surrounding his actions to contest the rigged election results of 2020. He did not try to overthrow that corrupt election. He contested it legally, as he should have. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, gave him immunity for his official acts as president. Now watch the demonic Dems try to make the case that his actions were unofficial. The bunny boiler, AOC, Alexandria Occasional Cortex, as Lindsay Perigo pointedly dubs her, has already stated that she wants to indict the Supreme Court for this ruling. As I said, bunny boiler. This is the most contentious election I think the world has ever seen. Rock on, President Trump, the world's most magnificent bastard. We need you. And that is Olivia's view for the Crunch this week.
And Olivia, that was absolutely fascinating. And I'm particularly interested in your views around the 25th Amendment and whether or not they can actually make that work.
They could make it work if they were honest. But you're dealing with, I don't know how to think like a criminal, so I can't think like Kamala Harris, but it does require the VP to actually be the one that makes the judgment call and invoke the cabinet.
But you think about it, right? For years, you've had your media lickspittles telling everybody that Joe Biden's as sharp as a tack.
I know.
And he's in command of his faculties, that he's sharp, that he's
on top of his game.
He's the best that we've ever seen of Joe Biden.
So are you saying, Cam, that's another reason why they don't want to invoke it, because it makes them all look like grotesque liars, which they are?
Well, they are. But what it means is that in order to invoke the 25th Amendment, they're going to have to say, yeah, Joe's feeble. He's non compos mentis. He's unfit to be the president, when they've just been telling us that he is fit to be the president. And then when they do that, that installs Kamala Harris as the temporary president until the election. And nobody wants that. I don't even think Kamala Harris wants that.
I think it would scare her.
Will they get him to withdraw? I don't think so. Jill Biden's invested in this, as is Hunter Biden. I mean, he needs the big guy to stay there to deal with his own particular issues with prosecutors. He needs the big guys to pardon him when he gets convicted, and he has been convicted, and we're just waiting sentencing now of Hunter Biden.
Yeah, exactly. He needs his father there to pardon him.
Yeah, which then brings us to a scenario because replacing him at the DNC is going to be very difficult, because there'll be an absolute, to use the proverbial shit fight on the floor of the conference or convention. They don't want that, right? So the only option that's left, and then when you look at the people are saying, well, hang on, how come we haven't seen a letter from the intelligence agencies saying that he needs to be replaced? Could it be that they actually intend to kill him?
Well, that's why I say he's in a very precarious position.
Yeah.
Because, someone will stick a pillow over his face and say, oh, look, he was old. He had dementia. Look, he just died. He suddenly deteriorated. We didn't know he was this bad, blah, blah, blah. But that thing you mentioned about the intelligence agencies, no other time in history would something so egregious as the leader of the free world with obvious advanced dementia, without the intelligence agencies absolutely seeing that as a security threat. And it was Mike Benz who brought that to attention, wasn't it?
Yeah. But, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, remember the intelligence agencies wrote a letter to the media saying that Trump was, they did it then to Trump. But
they did it.
Complete silence on Biden.
And the 51 of them that said that he had been colluding with Russia. Remember that?
Yeah. The Russia hoax.
The Russia hoax. So, it really is. I can't help but think they've painted them through their corruption, their lying, their deceit, and their despicable deeds. I can't help but think they've painted themselves into a really bad corner.
They used their own paint and their own brush.
Yeah. And they deserve to be hung on their own petard. And I guess the big question is what will happen to Trump on the 11th of July, which is only, 2 weeks away, less than that, with his sentencing. Will he go to Rikers Island, or will he get bail?
He'll still win from Rikers Island. But I'll tell you what the debate showed us, and it showed the utter dishonesty of the mainstream media in the United States, and indeed here, but let's just focus on the United States. In just 10 minutes of that 90-minute debate, the public in the United States got to see the mask fall. They got to see that for the last 6 years at least, that they have been gaslit by the media that this guy was sharp as a tack. There's a video of it on YouTube, about this. It's a meme now. It's just going around. It's all over X, with all these quotes from the media saying, "Oh, Joe Biden's on top of his game, sharp as a tack, engaging, commands meetings that he's in." They all know that they've been gaslit.
Yeah.
If somebody knows they've been gaslit, then they think back on everything else they've been told, and all of a sudden they realize that what they've been told about Donald Trump has come from the same people. And maybe perhaps we shouldn't trust those people anymore, and we should actually believe our own eyes and our own ears rather than what the media have given us.
Well, believe it or not, even Jake Tapper's making that case. He actually used that phrase, believing your own eyes. Jake flipping Tapper, who's been one of the most hostile people to Trump for the last, 8 years. But did you see Nancy Pelosi? 3 sheets to the wind, as usual, going on about how when I talk to Joe, he's right there. He's so sharp. I think she was talking to ABC, one of the alphabet agencies, media agencies. But
those are the talking point from the Biden camp. That's what they've been put out there. They trot out all the old drunks and the has-beens and everything to say that Joe Biden's sharp as a tack. He's all there. He's these are talking points that the Biden camp has come up with. Oh, and apart from the fact that he had a cold.
How pathetic.
A miraculous recovery the next day from the cold.
Yeah, didn't he? Juiced up on speed. It's really bad for them, Cam, though, because it brings into question all the executive orders and the reversing of legislation that he has done in this time. Because if he has had dementia all this time, which we know he has, if they take that seriously, then none of those decisions should stand.
You'll see hundreds of cases in the Supreme Court saying, well, he made that decision, that executive order, while he was out to lunch.
Yeah.
And they'll probably that's the other danger, isn't it, of using the 25th Amendment to get rid of Biden, is it then calls into question any decision he's made since the day he was elected.
That's why I don't think they'll do it. I think that they'll keep Biden in. They'll continue to abuse the demented old fool. And I don't even feel sorry for him. I mean, if Joe Biden was of sound mind, he would totally agree with this tactic. He would. So stuff him. I've got no sympathy. But, we've all known people in our lives, our old ones, who have had dementia, and none of them were as bad as Joe Biden is. And yet they couldn't drive their cars, they couldn't make decisions, they had to pass decisions off to their family or their lawyers. It really is a show of how corrupt the Democrats are. Why did they do it? Why back in 2020 did they run the guy with dementia instead of other talent that they may have had then?
No idea, but I think the debate was actually part of the fix to get Joe, because there was no audience, right? But somehow somebody leaked video of Jill Biden helping senile old Joe find his way down 2 very shallow steps.
He had little stairs, yeah.
Right? Who leaked that? That had to have been a CNN staff member. It had to have been.
Well, so that goes to the argument that, or the idea that this whole thing was to flame him, to bring him down.
Yeah, but then they haven't contended with Jill Biden's stubbornness.
Well, it's as Mike Benz said, Cam.
It's elder abuse.
Yeah, it's way beyond that. As Mike Benz pointed out when he said that there's no letter from there's no, vocalness coming out from the intelligence agencies to say, hey, this guy has the nuclear codes. He said that the family isn't just the family. The family is those brothers who one of them is a member of, runs BlackRock. So there's something much bigger in play, I think, with this tactic to bring him down, that we're not being told, and God knows what that is. But I think that might go to the point I made about they need a massive either black swan event,
All of them, all of the things.
Yeah, all of them. Alien invasion from deep space. I mean, you name it. Anything is possible between now and November because they do not want Trump in that White House again. You know that.
Well, that's two options, haven't they got? They can kill Biden and get somebody else in or kill Trump.
Yeah, I don't think they can get to Trump because he always pays for his own security. Thank God.
Yeah. Anyway, Olivia, that was a fantastic view that you had there, and we'll do this again in 2 weeks.
Cheers, Cam. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Olivia and I have been dear friends for more than 20 years. She's one of the best political commentators out there. Tell me what you think of this week's Olivia's Views.
Our text machine is now live. Send us your thoughts by texting your message to 2057. That's 2057. So get in touch with us now.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week, we're going to find out what they thought about the US presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's go now to Cam's Buddies. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Miles. Good to have you back.
Hi, Cam. How are you?
Yeah, very good, actually. Things are looking up.
Excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that. And there's one person things are not looking up for, isn't it?
Well, yes, that's exactly what I want to talk to you about. Did you watch the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden? And if you did, or even if you didn't, and saw some of the reviews, what are your thoughts on that debate?
Well, I'm going to start by telling you a story. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed a story called The Emperor's New Clothes. And it was about this really powerful guy. And, he'd obviously done some good in the past. And the sycophants and the power brokers convinced him to go on parade in his undies and that he was wearing the most magnificent garment. And it took a child who had no vested interest to say, but Mum, he's wearing his undies. And look, I feel exactly the same way. This could be a modern day version of the Emperor's New Clothes.
Now, pretty much if you're a political observer and you've been, widely read and just don't take what the mainstream media says as gospel, you probably already knew that Biden was not, their lift didn't go to the top floor or there's a kangaroo loose in his top paddock, right? Definitely a couple of sandwiches short of a picnic. But
well, dementia's a neurological disease. And it doesn't happen like a cold. You don't suddenly, last week you're okay and this week you've got dementia. It doesn't work like that. And it's a long-term cognitive decline. And the power brokers and the sycophants have actually hidden that by trying to control the media that has covered Biden. And like you say, most of us could see that something wasn't right, but still the media and the power brokers and the sycophants were saying, he's the sharpest man in the meeting, he's got a photographic memory, he can, hold the floor and spout forth for 90 minutes. And clearly he can't.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because aren't the media in on this? Weren't they also the ones that were saying he's as sharp as a tack, his mental acuity is brilliant, he's got a photograph, all the things you've said, those are words that have been said by media people. So if you're a voter looking at this and thinking over all the years that Joe Biden's the president, he's doing a fantastic bang-up job, and then you saw that 90-minute display of bewilderment, are you going to feel a bit angry at the media and the Democrats for hiding this? As you say, it didn't come on suddenly. They've been gaslighting us for years.
I 100% agree. And that's why I said this is like the modern version of the Emperor's New Clothes. It took something where people had no vested interest. And I think Tucker Carlson made a comment in one of his lectures in Australia where it's like, before the debate, everything's fine, and Joe Biden's the greatest thing since sliced butter. But after the debate, it was like all these guys, oh my God, he's got dementia, and it was like a revelation to them. And I'm thinking they just couldn't hide the secret any longer. After 90 minutes of coverage and people watching what can only be described as classic signs of dementia on their TVs in their living rooms, it can't be hidden anymore.
For 90 minutes. I mean, the first 10 minutes was excruciating. 90 minutes is torture. I actually feel sorry for Joe Biden that they fill him full of drugs and trot him out there and get him to say his bit. And he can clearly tell. I mean, anybody who's had any interaction with people with dementia knows the frustration that the dementia sufferer goes through trying to elucidate their thoughts, but can't put all of the pieces together. And they get frustrated, they get angry, and then they get depressed. And I actually feel sorry for Joe Biden, but the person I hold responsible for this is his wife. She's egging him on. Unbelievable.
Listen,
she's a doctor.
He is being systematically humiliated, and I feel sorry for him. I'm sure that he has some political nous, and in the past he's done some good things. I'm sure that he has been a great politician, but to see him humbled and just trotted out like that for 90 minutes, and then for the vast majority, I would say, of the American public who are not really into the politics, and for them to see what their president actually is and does and how he conducts himself, I would suggest that a lot of Democrat voters are going to say, oh my goodness, I just can't bring myself to vote this election. And it might be that Trump wins with a landslide because the Democrat voters just stay home.
Well, Olivia said that if they 25th Amendment him, basically say he's incapable of acting and get rid of him as the president using the 25th Amendment, there's all sorts of constitutional issues with the executive orders that he's signed over the years. And you could well see lawsuits before the Supreme Court in the United States saying, well, when he signed this executive order, what was he the full quid then? Do we have an assessment of that? Or did it doesn't suddenly happen. And there'll be all sorts of things. It's going to put a whole lot of things into play that were never in play before because the Democrats lied about Joe Biden's frailty.
Yes, and I think, the emperor's new clothes comes to bear. There are power brokers behind the scenes, the sycophants, the talking heads on the media themselves. Man, they are guilty and they are culpable. And I firmly believe that for the average voter who may not have that much interest in politics and just lets it wash over them, if the average voter saw that debate, in fact, if they saw any of the debate, they would have not believed their eyes because they have been presented a carefully curated image of the president in 10 or 20-second bursts, and now it's all laid open for the world to see, and it's pretty disturbing, actually.
Is there going to be pushback for the media for their complicity in all of this?
Well, I think the media are already staggering, and, we see the New Zealand media going down the same road, and I'm like, well, I shouldn't be horrified. I know that the media in New Zealand are corrupt. I know that they're so left-leaning that it's a wonder they don't fall over. But the problem that I have is if they're going to tell such outrageous lies about a person's competence, what else are they capable of?
Well, that's exactly right. And that's what I think is happening here, is that we're finding out just how
duplicitous and dishonest our media are globally, but in particular in this case in the United States, very duplicitous.
And I mean, the thing is, the internet is awash with memes, and some of them have got actual video from CNN talking heads saying how amazing Joe Biden is. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the guy's previous career, but what a humiliating and totally undeserved way to end a career. And
it's sad.
I'm not the biggest Joe Biden fan in the world, but I feel that this is subhuman treatment.
Yeah, it's an ignominious end to what is a reasonable career in Congress. Anyway, Miles, I've got Lindley on the phone now, so I better take her call. And thanks for calling Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk next week.
See you later, Cam.
Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Lindley. Good to have you back.
Well, where have you been, Cam? My life's not been the same.
I know. I had a few personal issues to deal with 2 weeks ago, and last week, of course, the station had a little bit of a break for the long weekend. So anyway, we're back this week, and we're talking about the US presidential debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on that? Did you see it?
Of course I saw it. I watched it live, all 90 minutes of it, and the aftermath. What did I think of it? I have never seen anything like it in my life. I saw 90 minutes of a demented, rambling mannequin with an A1 voice implant staring into space.
Yeah.
Getting everything mixed up.
Just appalling.
Pardon?
It was just appalling.
It was. But, to be fair, I don't know if you sort of watch any of the real stuff about, Biden and Trump and all them. But I have watched quite a bit of it, and the only thing I'm shocked about, actually, is that everyone else was shocked. Because if we go back to prior to the election, he was nearly as bad as that then.
Yep.
And he was hidden away, if you remember, he was hidden away. And while Trump was doing rallies to 20,000 people plus, Biden only came out once in a blue moon to a drive-in sort of situation. I think COVID was about then. And he would have 6 cars of people turn up. And he was badly compromised back then. I don't know how he ever won the election, and one can only wonder on that one.
Well, we know how they won the election, and they fixed it.
Well, it was unbelievable.
It's a deceit on the American public what has gone on, because you're right. In 2020, he didn't campaign much. There were jokes that he was campaigning from his basement. Trump was massive rallies everywhere. And then Joe Biden wins, and then we almost hear nothing of him except these scripted announcements and things like that. But there was always, a hint that something was not right there. And but now we can be in no doubt now that there is something not right with Joe Biden. Absolutely, the doubt has disappeared.
Yes, well, I'm just itching to say it was obvious all the way through, because I've seen clips of him trying to give a speech on stage, which he's barely got through that, and he's had teleprompters there. And then he's got lost on stage. He's been unable to find his way off the stage. I've seen his wife rush out in a panic and grab him by the elbow and spin him round in the right direction. I've seen him turn around and shake hands with absolutely nobody. I've seen him fall off his bike before it even moved.
Yeah.
I've seen him tripping both up and down the steps into the plane.
Yeah.
He has said some absolutely ridiculously incorrect things, even though he's got a teleprompter. over the last 4 years. He has said some absolute bloopers that, well, of course, they never get shown on the mainstream media.
No.
And the man that I have seen has had dementia symptoms for the last 4 years. I can't understand why anybody would be surprised. And I think one of the guys, and that was on his own side, was asked for a comment after the debate, and the host said to him, what do you think happened? Do you think they gave Joe Biden, some drugs to help him and it sort of backfired? Drugs, he said, I think he's had a lobotomy.
Well, he was out to lunch, wasn't he? And I don't think that the format that CNN used was particularly helpful to him because, Trump was smart enough to realise there was going to be just his head and Joe Biden's head on the screen in a split screen most of the time. And so when Biden was mumbling away and talking nonsensical stuff, Trump didn't interrupt him. He didn't say anything. He just made facial expressions, which everyone could, of course, see, confused facial expressions. And the one time, the host said to him, President Trump, what do you think about that? And Trump said, well, I have no idea what he just said, and I doubt he does either. Right? And that was a statement of truth. At that point, here was Trump. I'm debating an idiot, not even a functional idiot anymore. This guy is out to lunch. But I actually blame his wife. She's a doctor. She must know this.
Well, yeah, but she's not a medical doctor.
Well, she's Dr. Jill Biden. Let's just use that.
No, she's just a doctor on paper, one of those ones.
Oh, right, one of those ones. But she's still she would see him doing the same stuff in the House.
Oh, well, she'd have to because, I don't think he hasn't actually answered questions, at the press conferences for a very long time. If he does one at all, he just turns around and sort of stutters off stage, disappears. And I understand that he doesn't do any business at all. Is it after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something? He actually can't go the distance of an 8-hour day. Everybody knows it.
Well, we had a Prime Minister who used to go home at 4 o'clock too.
Who was that?
Her name was Jacinda Ardern.
Oh, God. Yes.
Yep.
Well, we won't go there. We won't go there, Cam. You'll upset me.
Yeah, well, it was well known around Parliament. But, of course, the media never said anything because, she was their girl.
Well, that's right. Well, the media's been the same with Joe Biden. They have cleverly edited him for the last 4 years, and they've managed to present him as a distinguished gentleman ruling the USA. And it's just, how has that ever happened? Why is he there? I'd like you to tell me that. Why is he there? Because he is clearly totally off his face.
Mm.
But there must be a reason that they want him there. Does he just rubber stamp everything? Yes, 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 yes. Or why is he there?
Well, I think the person to ask for that would be Barack Obama. But when we got a hint about this, though, remember when the investigator in the documents case for Joe Biden taking documents home and keeping them in his house, he said in his report,
in his car,
we won't prosecute him because he doesn't remember basic facts and comes across as a bewildered old man. So we had the hints. There was terrible people who were complaining about it at the time. It was terrible that he said those things. But that was the reality of the situation, and we've now seen that. We've had 90 minutes on CNN of a bumbling, fumbling, sad old man in the twilight years of his life, not just his career. And I was talking to Miles just before you, and I said it's sad. It's sad that he is being embarrassed and ending his career in ignominy, and you have to say that the Democratic handlers and his own wife are the ones that are responsible for this.
Yeah, well, I've actually gone beyond the sad and feeling sorry for him because, look, at the end of the day, this is one of the most powerful positions in the world. It has huge influence over other countries. And he is the president. Now, this is beyond sad and feeling sorry for him. We should be feeling sad and sorry for ourselves, really. It's not good enough. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's bordering on criminal, in my opinion. He obviously hasn't got the nous to realise the pickle he's in and step down. But as you say, those around him know. So I can only think that they want him there. They don't mind that he's like that. He must just rubber stamp everything or something. There'll be a reason.
Yeah, I think he's a puppet. And
he is a puppet.
Yeah, and it's not that he rubber stamps. He's the figurehead. But I think what we can see hidden in the background there, look very closely. Oh, yes, he's the puppet. The person with his hand up the puppet is Barack Obama.
Is it?
Well, you have a look at it. He always appears with Biden. Biden was his vice president. Barack Obama has stated publicly that the changes that are needed in society will take longer than one term or even a presidency. It's intergenerational, and they didn't expect Trump to win in 2016, so they had to fix that in 2020 to get man in to continue on with the program. And the only person with that program and the things that are being said and done is Barack Obama. So, there's Occam's razor, the statement that in a complex situation, often the simplest explanation is the most truthful explanation.
Yes, well, I always say that if something seems absolutely outrageous and ridiculous, it's because the intention is to have it there for some reason. So what you're saying is that Barack Obama is using him to continue his great transformation program. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. That's Olivia's view as well, and Olivia is a keen observer of politics. I tend to agree with her on that.
Well, it is credible.
It is. All right, Lindley, I've got to take the next call, so thank you for calling Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk again next week.
Yeah, we'll see you again on, September the 10th, next debate. Watch this space. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Paul. Good to have you back.
Thank you, Cam, and welcome back. I've missed you for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Sometimes you got to go away so people can, miss you.
No problem at all. Well, I hope they haven't missed me because I'm just an also-ran. But I like listening to you on the radio on the Thursday.
Oh well, mate, you can't you can't be that bad because you're one of my buddies.
Yeah, I can chat with you in person, of course.
Yes, that's right. Hey, did you watch the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump last Friday?
Yeah, I did. I found it very interesting. I thought that Trump was very controlled, and I've seen a few later commentaries saying that they'd tried to prep Biden for which Trump turned up. Was it the outlandish Trump that has to go, or was it the controlled Trump? And they were going to have a strategy to bait him, to make him go from controlled to outlandish if they could. But, of course, to be able to do that, you have to turn up. And I don't think Joe turned up. I just looked at him thinking, if this is what a week off gives you, and then he's all go, and he just looked like a sad old man. And as everyone has been saying on social media, it's Jill Biden having elder abuse of this poor guy. And
I saw a video.
I think it's interesting.
Some guy reporting elder abuse. He said, I'd like to report elder abuse. I've seen a person, being abused, and the abuser is a Dr. Jill Biden. This person's on the other end of the what? But yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, I think there could be a con going on here. I think the Dems probably have figured out that Jill and the Biden plan won't allow Joe to not have a go at running. So I think they might have let him have a go and fall flat on his face. So the America that's been conned by the local media, saying nothing to see here, he's all good, he's as smart as ever. Whenever I've discussed anything with him, it's the sharpest man in the room. All these sorts of things. And then when they just might have been thinking, okay, we want to replace him with some fool like Gavin Newsom or something, who's been doing a lot of campaigning for the last year on how he could be the guy. And then if you listen to some of the words he said when he was interviewed, I'm behind Biden all the way, I'll do whatever is required kind of thing. He's not saying I won't go and take him on. It was more, it's like the bullshit words that they put around things so that they can't be called out on a lie. And I think it's interesting when people say, because if you put up who lied at the debate, if you happen to search that, it's everybody talking about how Trump lied and Trump's lies. I said even next buddy on, if you have Jack on, he's going to go on and on about Trump's lies. But when Trump says something like, I believe I didn't lose the last election. Now, if he believes that, it's not a lie. Whether he won or not is not debated here. It's if he believes he wasn't won, then that's not a lie. And when you have things that no one even mentions, that Biden says that there was no deaths in the military on his watch, except for the 13 that died leaving Afghanistan, so their families were probably a bit hurt. And then the 3 that were killed by a drone just at the beginning of this year, so their families are also a bit hurt. So no is quite a definitive number, like 0, not 16. And then Biden says, the Border Patrol staff, they support me. And in real time, the head of the Border Staff Union texts and says, we have never supported Joe Biden, nor ever will we. I think that might be a lie as well. And I think the main watchers of the debate are likely to have been Russia, China, Venezuela, and thinking if the US is so weak, we might as well, because they would have watched that and they would have seen later that 65% think Trump won, and then the 35 diehard Dems who are going to be Dems no matter who you put up there. You can put up a sheep, a sheep that's actually yes, whatever, and they'd still vote for it. So that's the other 35% But when these other powers look and think, well, that country's so weak, we might as well do what we're going to do, whatever it means, and before that we get a sensible guy back in there. I think the world is in a very precarious place after that debate.
Do you think, I mean, that's absolutely certain. I mean, if I was Vladimir Putin, I was looking at that guy thinking, well, I don't have to worry about any retaliation if, from the United States if I go and, do something extreme. Because this guy's out to lunch, and he's supposedly the guy in charge of the nuclear button. Nothing to fear here. But if you talk about precariousness, Olivia said earlier in the show that she thinks that Joe Biden is in a very precarious position because if they use the 25th Amendment to remove him, they're pretty much saying they've lied to us for the last 6 years about his mental abilities, because these things don't just suddenly happen, right? It creeps up. All right, it's not a surprise to anyone who's associated with him. And it also questions the fact of all these executive orders that he signed. Was he fit and proper to sign those? Was he all there when he signed those executive orders? And then, of course, they've got the problem with many states have already voted in their primaries selecting Biden as the nominee. Of course, that has to be ratified at the Democratic National Committee. But there's a chance that, well, he just dies in his sleep. And they come out and they say, terribly sorry, America, we've got some bad news for you. President Biden has died in his sleep overnight, and this morning President Kamala Harris was sworn in as per the Constitution. And then the fix is in, and poor Joe shuffles off with a state funeral, and that's the end of him.
I think he is in a very precarious position if the Biden family decide that he's not going to retire because it's not financially convenient for them. But I think also when you look at like Tucker Carlson was mentioning that what these folk do is whatever they accuse Trump of, that's what they're doing. And so the easiest way to figure out what they're doing is to see what they're accusing folk of. And so when they all say so-and-so lied and so-and-so lied, that means we're lying. And when they're saying Russia, 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 well, they are the ones that did all sorts of dealings via their son. And they're saying he's 51 of the CIA saying that the laptop is a hoax, and then they name them all these high-profile names. Well, all those 51 have lied, so they're very keen to keep Joe in because it will be obvious when he's gone that they will be gone too. And so there's so many people in the gravy train of the Joe Biden campaign that will lose their jobs otherwise that they're happy to do all these sorts of things. And now that I see there's been a ruling out saying that you can't really have a go at a previous president, even like they're saying that because Trump, when they say that's an absolute ridiculous lie that Trump has said, so Trump may exaggerate about some things, but his absolutely ridiculous barefaced lies turn out to be true. So when they're saying that the Democrats are spying on him and his campaign, and later on it's admitted that they're spying on his campaign because a number of things that have happened, and when he said it, it was just a horrendous lie. I mean, of course, people like Jack don't look at the second part of things. They only hear the first part of the news where they say so-and-so lied and so he must have. And like when they say Biden says he was on a number 6, he was on 6 handicap. And then Trump says, I doubt that he could hit a ball 50 metres. Well, my understanding is 4 or 5 years ago, he was on a 6.8 handicap. But a 6.8 handicap is not a 6. It's a 6.8 handicap. It's nearer 7 than 6. And why have these guys got so much time they can get their handicap down to that number if they're the leaders of the free world? You would have thought they'd be a bit busy. And now I see that they're saying things like Joe Biden is able to work 6 hours a day. This is from Jill Biden. So anything that he does in that line has to be between 10 and 4. Well, the world doesn't have calamities to a timetable. But when the timetable says, someone's done something stupid in another part of the world that requires the Americans to talk about it, I'm sorry, guys, it's not between 10 and 4. So the president can't look at that till tomorrow.
I know. All right, Paul, I've got to take the next call. So thanks for calling Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk again next week.
Bye for now.
See you, bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jack. Good to have you back.
How are you, Cam? Long time no see.
Well, if you turned up to lunch on Monday, we might see you a bit more frequently.
Well, I have the Zoom call I have to make to Australia just the same time.
Well,
pain, I know.
I'd schedule it to another time. Lunch is far more important.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jack.
It's not up to me, unfortunately.
Did you see the presidential debate in the US on Friday?
Oh, yes, I did.
Oh, let me guess, you're a Joe Biden fan and you think he's, wonderful.
Well, to me, it was the fat, narcissistic, lying, thieving, criminal idiot versus geriatric ditherer. I mean, Trump didn't win, but Biden certainly lost it.
I don't know. You must be watching a different debate. But, it's funny the perceptions that people have. But I think that the world population saw in 90 minutes a picture of Joe Biden that the political tragics amongst us already knew, but that the mainstream media had been keeping from us with, 15-second clips, and then spending years telling us this guy is as sharp as a tack. He's on top of his game. He's the sharpest he's ever been, and ad nauseum, over and over and over again, we're told that this guy is brilliant. And yet we saw 90 minutes of a sad, bewildered old man being taken advantage of by God knows who, but mostly his wife.
I can't understand why the hell he wants to do it at his age. He's just not up to the task. Surely he knows that.
I don't think he knows anything. Like he would seriously.
I think you're right.
he would wake up in the morning, and even if he had egg all dripping down his chin and crumbs of toast left on the plate, he'd say to his wife, Jill, are you going to give me breakfast this morning? I mean, that's what happens when you have advanced dementia.
Yeah, look, I know that Paul and all you sycophants of Paul all love Donald Trump, even though he's a moron. But I'm not a Biden lover, but I'm certainly not a Trump fan, I can tell you that.
Given the choice,
really, knowing the choice.
Yeah, given the choice between, if you were a US citizen and you had to vote in the next election and you had a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who are you going to vote for?
Oh, definitely Biden, because really, Yes Minister says it all. They don't probably watch it in America, but really, he's not making any decisions. It's all made by the guys behind him, like in Yes Minister. And I think Trump would be, he'd sort of like try and overrule them. Biden would just go along with them. So definitely Biden over Trump, even though he's an idiot.
I like rascals and scallywags, and nothing.
I know you do.
Nothing makes the swamp creatures of Washington more frightened than seeing Donald Trump and his red flags coming down the main road towards the White House, and just for that reason alone, I would vote for him. Also, I want the value of my Trump signed hat to go up in value, so yeah, I'll be voting for Donald Trump on that.
Yeah, I can understand. And also, I suppose we have to think of the entertainment value. There hasn't been much entertainment lately on TV. At least when Trump's around, there's entertainment.
Yeah, so that's why you vote for Winston Peters. Endless entertainment, right? He's a rascal and a scallywag. Earlier on the show today, I said to him, I've got a bone to pick with you, Winston. I said, everybody I know says don't vote for Winston Peters because you don't honour your promises. And I've seen the last couple of weeks a whole lot of promises being honoured, and I'm wondering if you're okay.
Winston's just an enigma. He's doing a fantastic job out there at the moment, quite frankly, in my opinion.
He is indeed. I'm very pleased that I voted for Winston Peters.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Jack, we'll talk again next week.
Okay, see you later.
See you, thanks. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jimmy. Good to have you back.
Good to have you back, Cameron. There's a lot been happening, mate. What have you got your eyes on tonight?
Look, we can't have a political show without discussing the US presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
The utter shit show. I watched it with just horror, to be honest.
Look, you're a bit of a media maven, right? If you're a US citizen, you've been watching NBC News or CNN or Fox News for all these years under the Biden administration, you've been told that Joe Biden's as sharp as a tack, that he's in command, full command of his faculties. He's conducts meetings brilliantly, one-on-one. He's all there and on top of all the topics and subjects. And then you watch that debate. Would you start feeling that maybe you'd been gaslit?
Oh, 100%. And I actually know some American people who are just so beyond horrified, and they've typically been Democratic voters. You know, they're just normal sort of business people. And now they're just stuck. They just don't know what the hell to think. And the media has protected Biden, you know. And it's because I knew he had weak faculties. Like, we kind of all knew that, but not that bad, you know. So that was just an utter horror show. It's probably one of the worst political things I've ever seen. And I actually thought that the muting made Trump seem more statesmanlike because he couldn't, do his usual ranting and raving. He got silenced.
Yeah, he could just sit there and they showed his picture next to Biden's, and when he was talking, Biden would have this vacant, fly-catching sort of with weird eyes, and you could almost see the dribble coming out the side of his mouth, couldn't you?
He wasn't there at all. It's just, honestly, it's just so horrendous. Of all the people in America, the amazing, brilliant people, and to end up at this point with these two is just very bizarre. How come it's worked like that? How come? Like, is it the media?
Well, the media are in on it. Absolutely, the media are in on it. And the Democrats have gaslit and lied to us about the frailty of Joe Biden. Jill Biden has pushed that as well. Barack Obama's in on it. But you have to say they're all colluding together to paint this picture that Donald Trump is unfit for office and Joe Biden is, the best president they've ever had. And it's all been lies. It's all been gaslighting of the electorate. And I think we're going to see a massive vote against the Democrats come November.
Well, we better hope so. Do you think they'll chuck Biden out and replace him?
Well, I talked about that with Olivia, and it's quite difficult for them to chuck him out because many states have had their primaries. The Democratic National Committee meets at the convention in August, so just a few weeks away, where they'll have to confirm him and Kamala Harris as the nominees. The only person who can remove Joe Biden from any of this is Joe Biden himself, who puts his hand up and says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But Jill Biden and Hunter Biden aren't going to let him do that. And he's not capable of making a decision. As I just said to Jack, earlier, he's the kind of guy that he's sitting there at the breakfast table with egg all over his face, crumbs on the plate. And he says to Jill, are you going to give me breakfast yet? That's how out to lunch he is. And they're not going to let that happen. So that leaves the Democrats with the 25th Amendment, which requires honesty from the vice president, to then go to Congress and say the president's unfit to carry on. That raises a whole lot of constitutional issues about executive orders that have been signed, all of that sort of thing, because you can now question those executive orders and say, well, if he's out to lunch now, when he signed this one a week ago, was he out to lunch then? What about this one 2 weeks ago? Was he out to lunch then? At what point did he not have dementia? And that throws a whole lot of things. The only thing that's left then is for Joe Biden to quietly die in the middle of the night. And they announced that Kamala Harris is now the president of the United States because sadly the aged and infirm Joe Biden didn't wake up.
Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?
Yeah. Reality. This is the intelligence, swamp creatures. That's the sort of thing they'd do. I mean, it sounds farcical and crazy to even suggest it, but that's the reality that they're facing right now. How do we get rid of Joe?
Yeah, and save face.
Yeah, well, they killed Kennedy, didn't they?
Let's not go there. Who knows? But the state of Biden on stage was he can't be president. Like when you start one answer and end up answering something else. I mean,
yeah. Oh, it was amazing watching Trump. They said, "Oh, President Trump, what do you think about that?" And he says, "I have no idea what he just said, and neither does he."
He doesn't either.
Yeah, he doesn't either.
I saw a clip comparing Biden 4 years ago, and he was much more astute 4 years ago. Like he really was answering with clarity and passion. Something's happened. I don't know when, maybe the last 2 years, and then the media have just covered it up. I mean, we see the media around the world doing this, just covering up. Like, look at Arden, all these massive failings, and yet still hugely covered by the media. So it's not really an American problem. It's a Western problem, really.
Yeah, well, while the Democrats have a problem with Joe Biden, I think a bigger problem is that the American public have now found out that their media have been gaslighting them for God knows how many years. When people find out they've been gaslit, they get really angry. And I think there's going to be a huge backlash against all these talking heads in the mainstream media who have been talking up Joe Biden like he's the new messiah. It's clearly not the case.
Well, it needs to happen. And, the trust in media is falling, and it just continues to fall. And then we get stuff like this, bombshells. We need a clean out. I see this week in New Zealand that the Nationals are going to pass Labor's. It's about the funding of the media from Facebook and Google.
Oh yeah, it's all that. I thought, hello, here we go. Here is errant stupidity being done by National Ministers Paul Goldsmith, ably supported by Willis, trying to pass a law to control companies that have more revenue than the New Zealand economy does, and thinking that they're going to win. I mean, it just beggars belief that they think that they can do that. I mean, here's how it'll go. They'll go, we've passed this law now, and now Google and Facebook and X, we invite you to sit down so that we can work out some pricing for the news. And they'll just hear a click on the end of the phone as they hang up.
Isn't it fundamentally just subsidising one failing business with another good business? That's all that fundamentally they're forcing on them.
And nobody's going to do it. They're just not going to. They're not going to come to a meeting. They're not going to pay. They're just going to switch it off because New Zealand's revenue for those companies is rounding figures for them. So they'll just go. Well, maybe we'll.
They even switched off Canada, didn't they?
They did. They switched off Canada. They switched off Australia. Well, how'd that work out? And here we are yet again thinking that because we're New Zealand
doing the same.
Yeah. It's just like Nationals campaign in Britain, like Labor, but less shit.
Yeah, but that's my problem is why is National entertaining this stupid law? And literally it's a stupid Labor law. And, it's subsidising bad businesses with good businesses. We need these businesses to change, innovate, and find new ways for revenue, not just be propped up by false laws. Even though it won't work anyway, but just thank God Axe stood up to it, and did their agree to disagree. And
what the government's trying to what Paul Goldsmith is trying to say is the equivalent of saying to Henry Ford, "Look, you've really devastated the buggy whip manufacturers' market, and so therefore we're going to now put a tax on each tyre on your Model T
to go to the buggy whips,
which is going to subsidise the buggy whip manufacturers." I mean,
exactly, it's exactly what's happened. So why is National entertaining it? Why are they being so shit?
Well, it's because they don't. This is the problem with political parties that stand for nothing. It means they fall for anything, and they've fallen for Willie Jackson's stupid bill. And anyone who accuses me of being a national sycophant clearly doesn't listen to what I say. I think
I like how you give third sides of Parliament, Cam. That's great. That's how all commentators should be. Hate both sides.
If a politician, doesn't matter what colour is on their rosette, whether it's blue, red, yellow, black, whatever, green, especially green or brown, if they do something stupid, I'm going to say, you've done something stupid. And I think Paul Goldsmith and Christopher Luxon have screwed up. And they're going to find out that these big tech companies aren't magnanimously going to sit down and negotiate with the New Zealand Herald. But honestly, the revenues for the New Zealand Herald will be less than the revenues for Google from New Zealand.
That's going to hurt, because what it did in Canada hurt the small people, because they will get generating good revenue clicks off social media, That's a problem. It's going to wipe out all the independents again.
That's why you have...
Is this why Melissa Lee got the sack, because she wouldn't agree with it?
Probably.
And are they doing this to try and soften the media to get a more sycophantic media?
Dead right. You got it. Spot on. Luxon's currying favour with the media, who are going to shit on him anyway. I mean, the guy's a
shit on him anyway.
The guy's a moron. Anyway, Jimmy, I think I better sign off and finish up the show. It's been fantastic having you back, and we'll do this again next week.
Thanks, Cam. Have a great day. Cheers, mate.
Bye. You can always rely on my buddies for truth bombs, and we certainly heard some there about the Joe Biden and Donald Trump debate. Tell us your thoughts on Cam's buddies by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Are you on the RCR mailing list? Never miss a beat of the news and hard-hitting stories you've come to know and love. Stay in the loop. Visit realitycheck.radio/email.
And now it's time for the whale bag. Greg says, Cam, I enjoy your content. Thank you. Mike says, Cam, I've listened to this a couple of times now, and it is just amazing. I think it might be just your cup of tea. Oh, Olivia might find it interesting too. And he's referred to a Tucker Carlson interview with Jeffrey Sachs. Somebody, anonymous person, says, hi, I hope all is well with Cam. I missed the weekly crunch. Yeah, everything's fine with me. Thanks for asking. I just had a few personal issues to deal with in the background, and I couldn't produce the show for that week. Well, anyway, I'm back this week. Catherine says, hey, Cam, how you doing? Lots of stuff happening on the political front at the moment. The Trump-Biden debate and Supreme Court ruling, the UK election insight, shenanigans going on in France to try to keep the nationalists from being able to form a government, and locally more stuff about Kainga Ora and the ongoing saga about John Tamahiri and Te Pati Maori. I do hope you and Olivia are going to be on Friday's political panel with Paul, because I'm keyed up waiting for a ripping session on Friday. Now about Olivia's view. Jennifer writes and says, I'm behind on Replay's Story of My Life, as there's just so much to listen to. I've just listened to Olivia and Cam on the 6th of June, and I'm so excited to know this is going to be a regular slot. Their depth of knowledge on world affairs will make this a must-listen for me. Mike says, hi, Cam, just catching up on the shows I've missed. Really enjoying the crunch, and in particular, Olivia's views. I really love hearing her speak and how she always makes her topic so interesting. As usual, you guys are doing a great job, so thanks for the best political show out there. Cheers, Mike. Bronwyn writes and says, hi, Cam, just caught up on the latest 2 shows and want to add my voice to those who are delighted Olivia will be doing a regular slot. There'll be another to add to my must-listens. Catherine, Liam, and especially Malcolm Roberts were also extremely interesting, and I love Senator Roberts' no-nonsense approach. I hope he'll be on RCR again from time to time. And poor Jack, he has more than one fan. Well, I can't figure out how any friend of yours can still maintain a pro-vax stance. I do love his dour approach, and his opinions on most other things are very down-to-earth. I nearly said all other things, and then I remembered he's going out of his way to watch TV3 News. Catherine writes and says, absolutely loved Olivia's view today. That was the 20th of June. A really timely comment about Holocaust denial and a pure stroke of brilliance to introduce it with the story of the power of forgiveness from Les Miserables. Well done, Olivia. Too true about the historical negators. Loved it. Can't wait to hear more from Olivia's views. Janet writes about my interview with Liam Hare. I've yet to hear Te Pati Maori articulate what they can do for humanity. They're in there purely for spectacle and grandstanding. Pathetic, really. It's a definite no to the upper house, however. I enjoyed the cut and thrust of Liam's interview. Thank you. And now some feedback on my interview with Malcolm Roberts. Dot from Dargaville says, I loved your interview with Senator Malcolm Roberts. He's so knowledgeable on so many subjects, definitely speaking the truth, and is a straight shooter. Just love listening to him. Jan says, hi, Cam. Thanks heaps for the interview with Malcolm Roberts. What an interesting listen it was. I do hope he and Shane Jones make contact and would love to be a fly on the wall of their convo. Maybe you can make it happen on air for us all to enjoy. Cheers and thanks to you all as always. We've got an awesome interview, Cam. I love Malcolm. I'll dearly love him and Shane to have a chinwag. Bravo. And Malcolm Roberts is articulate and well-researched. If only we had MPs like him in New Zealand. Liz on Facebook said he's so proactive, very valuable Australian politician up against a massive dark side, powerful politician fighting pure evil. And now for some comments from my Cam's buddies of 6th of June. I was on Facebook. It says it's too much. It's too tough for landlords. So then they get out of the market and then they haven't got enough houses. So it's a surprise, is it? That was Lindley saying she wants a fairer deal for landlords. We've got some comments about that. They said, don't even think about being a landlord. Tenants can do what they like. As for agents, well, they have no accountability. Cheryl says, wealth must not be used to harm poor people. Ryan says, the opportunity cost of the Clayton's rental market is poverty-based socialism. Own nothing, being happy. Ged says, funny how Luxon has 50 rentals. That works great for him, and remember how much they charge for the rentals, twice what the mortgage is, the poor things. I'm not sure he's got 50 rentals. I think he might have about 6. Cheryl, this woman, like so many who are fortunate enough to be in a well-off lifestyle, is just abusive. People aren't worth anything more than the money they can give up. And Kate says, what about fairness for good tenants who look after the property and pay out overpriced rent on time? I'm a single mum, kids growing now, but never was able to get social housing and have had to fork out market rent, which can't afford for 27 years. How can landlords justify $600 to $700 a week in rent? And Trevor says, why do landlords think houses just vanish if they are no longer rentals? And that's the whale bag for this week. That's it for the Crunch this week. Winston Peters was at his mercurial best, and he really is delivering for us at the moment. Long may that continue. He was very compassionate and thoughtful in his views about Golriz Garriman. Not so much, though, on the Green Party or Te Pāti Maori. Nathan joined me in the studio today for a convivial chat that started with his cancellation, the COVID era, and the problems with media and how to shift the dial against the system. And naturally, Olivia was on point with Olivia's views. This is why Reality Check Radio exists, so that we can share these interesting characters with you all and have difficult discussions and not shy away from them. You can keep up with all my shows and indeed all of our shows by using the RCR app, and you can even use the app to stream live. And a big thanks to the team that helps put all this together and makes it all work. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week. I'm loving all your feedback and really enjoying talking to so many people, sharing their thoughts on politics, life, and everything in between. So a big shout out to all of you, and thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget, email suggestions to inbox@realitycheck.radio for people for me to interview. And let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of Rodney Hyde's Real Talk coming up next, followed by a replay of Truth Speaker with Tobias Tahi. Looking forward to having you join me again next week for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.